Okay, I think we're good to go here. I'll be starting in just a second, so. Just trying to get some of my notes together here. Okay. I'll be ready in 1 second. Okay. Let me check. Everything good? Sounds good? Okay. Yeah, that's exactly the point. And I will be bashing both liberals and conservatives in this video today. So if you feel like I'm coming at one side, I assure you I'm not. Again, as I usually say, I am biased. I am someone who is conservative. I'm Republican. I lean right wing. But, yeah, there's a lot to say in response to the shooting and criticisms I have on both sides of it. So I'm going to get to that here. That's what I'm going to start with. So, okay, I guess I'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, there's basically two topics I have today. I'll probably go for around 2 hours. And then I'll be busy the rest of the day, so I just wanted to get a video out here. Yesterday I was unable to do my normal live stream, so I did one on the way to work about the Christchurch shooting. There was limited information that was available at that point, and I've since read more up on it, so I have more to say about it and the fallout that's came as a result of it. But I thought it was important to get kind of initial thoughts out there, and I'm pretty happy with that video. Though I will say one of the things I'll get to is the first video. It's actually one of the most watched videos I've ever put up. And it's the first video I've ever put up that has more dislikes than likes. So I think that'll be worth talking about. Who knows, maybe I could top that this time and get way more dislikes than likes. So, don't get me wrong, the tragedy is still on my mind. It's still a terrible thing. But I think I'm less morose today than I was yesterday. And one of the things, you know, that I firmly believe in life, and I started to say this yesterday in my video, is no matter how bad things get, you always got to see the bright sides in life, and you can't get too depressed or too down. And so don't think that I'm coming off as flippant if I'm joking around or laughing or something. My thoughts go out to all the people that were affected in that shooting and all the other issues that I might talk about in this video or when you're talking about in a blog. You can't just... You know, I often think you hear the trope of like how the president's hair always goes white by the time they get out of office because there's so much grave situations that they have to deal with, I guess is the implication. But you still, even if you're involved in something at that high level, like when I ran for Congress, one of the things I said was you still have to have fun. You still have to have a sense of humor. You can't allow yourself to get too down. So I think that we could have serious discussions about tragedies and terror attacks and things like that, but still not be overly morose and things like that. So though yesterday it was difficult, I will admit. So I will start off talking about the Christchurch shooting, terrorist attack, as I would call it, and what some of the fallout that I've seen that came from it. So I had a better chance to go through the manifesto. The first thing I'll say is I do agree with all those that are saying I'm not going to say this guy's name. I'm not going to link to his manifesto. I'm not going to... I didn't watch the video. I would recommend other people don't watch the video. If it's something you want to do, fine, so be it. But I guess don't share it because there does seem to be this movement where some responsible people in the media are trying to be like, look, we should stop glorifying this, stop giving people free press that commit these horrendous attacks. And so that is something that I will try to follow through. Now, granted, I have 3 people watching now. That video yesterday had 3,000 people. So it's not that I have a huge audience or anything like that. But still, I want to do my small part to not give this, terrorist any more credit or any more publicity than I should. So So I started to say yesterday, and one of the people, it was hard for me to read a lot of the chat that was going on because I was driving. So today, hopefully, if you have something to say. And one of the things about my channel, if you're a regular here or not, I do like to respond to people, and I enjoy criticism, particularly constructive criticism. So if you think I'm wrong about something, I'll try to engage you on that, and you can feel free to give your opinions. It'll be easier today because I'm not driving, so I'll have a better chance to read the chat. But I did start to say, someone said that it wasn't just about racism. I think that if that was the interpretation that I gave early in my video yesterday, that's not what I was trying to say. I do think that this person was a racist or a bigot, or at least hated Islam and thought of them as invaders. I do think that that's true, but I also think it's true, like I was saying, the metaphor from the movie The Dark Knight, where they're talking about the Joker, and Alfred, the butler, is explaining how they ran across this person when he was in the military that they thought was stealing diamonds for the sake of stealing them, but it turns out he had no interest in the diamonds. And he says, some people just want to see the world burn. That's truly how I feel about this person. Because if you were serious, let's say it was just about, I hate Muslims and I want to get rid of them, then any material you put out describing why you committed the actions you did would be very clear and outline, atrocities you feel Muslims have created, things like that, exactly what you would like to see done. But instead, there's a lot of trolling going on in the manifesto. For example, some parts of it, he claims that he learned his violent actions from the video game Spyro the Dragon. Spyro's like, for those of you that aren't into video games, it's basically the equivalent of like Mario Brothers or Sonic the Hedgehog. It's not a violent game. You're a cartoon dragon and you're going around doing stuff. So it seems that's clearly a trolling mark. That's clearly nonsense. That's not the truth. He also gives a shout out to PewDiePie, which is kind of an internet meme. And he adds other things that are internet memes if you follow the stuff that he's discussing. This shows that there is a lot of what he's doing is trolling. And you can see that further in the more serious things he's talking about. But this is your first clue, really, when you look at this type of stuff. It's like, okay, this isn't a person who is being totally honest in this manifesto. And so the reason that the trolling is going to be impactful is because he is basically trolling the media, as we'll get to here in a bit. What I'll read some of what his manifesto says, and you can see how he's basically admitting that he's going to play the media. He's going to play sides against each other, and that's kind of his intention. So we'll get to that in a second. But I think it's important to note that it is more, to me, and again, this is just my gut feeling, but it seems to me that we should be careful when reading his manifesto and taking things at face value. I have no proof of what his true motivations were. It's just my insight in looking into what he did and what he said about it. And so my gut feeling tells me that he does harbor some sort of hatred against Muslims. And that, because I think that because there's this theory like, well, what if he's a left-wing person? Or what if he secretly really likes Muslims, let's put it that way, and that he shot them up in an effort to gain sympathy for Muslims? You would have to be such a sociopath beyond what any I've ever known to sympathize with a group of people and so kill them, innocent ones of them, like this, in order to gain sympathy for them. So I do think that the mere fact that he was able to shoot so many of these people that were innocent and didn't specifically commit atrocities shows that he probably did harbor some sort of hatred to them. Does that mean his hatred is unique to unique to Muslims? I'm not saying that necessarily. Am I supporting what? The attack? No, I condemn it wholeheartedly, if that's what you're asking. So now, one of the things that was troubling is, so I'll get to this. Yesterday, the video I did, it had more dislikes than likes, and I think a lot of that had to do that, people said I was virtue signaling or somehow trying to, I don't know. To me, there's people on the right that I'll criticize, or I don't even know if saying on the right. There are people that dislike Islam so much that they were seeking to say, oh yeah, so what? Innocent people got killed. Yeah, too bad for them. But hey, they shouldn't have been in the country in the first place. And I'm vehemently against that attitude. And I think a lot of people were upset about that, which I don't care. I'm going to be unabashed in that. So yeah, I'm clearly not supporting this. But one of the things I started to say, and I wanted to wait a day until I elaborated on, I was talking about the idea of, could this be a conspiracy? And to me, I think that this is obviously a real attack, but what I said was just because something's a real attack doesn't mean that we shouldn't look carefully at who's going to exploit that attack for their benefit. And I talked about how you would have people in the political arena and the media be exploiting that. And we saw that come out in full force the rest of yesterday. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about was the fallout of this attack. So you see media people, for example, coming out and they're trying to blame this all on the right. Now, as I said above, they'll take parts of his manifesto and say, this proves that he's kind of this right-wing person. It's linked to Donald Trump. It's linked to Trump supporters. It's linked to Candace Owens because the manifesto, blah, blah, blah. And as I said above, we should be very critical because we know that he's trolling in parts of the manifesto. So we should kind of look between the lines and see exactly what he's trying to say. However, I am going to read a part of the manifesto here to you, because the media is taking parts of this manifesto and using it to exploit and go after the groups that they don't like. Particularly, as you know, the media is 90% in the Democratic Party, establishment Democratic Party. And so they're specifically going after Republicans or right-wing people and things like that. So because of that, I wanted to read parts of the manifesto that I think could shine light on exactly. He's saying more than what the media is just telling you. So I'm going to read some of the parts of his Q&A from his manifesto, just some selections I've taken. So this might take a little while, but the point of me reading this is to show it's not so cut and dry as the media will have you. This is somehow Trump's fault. It's right-wing people. No, it's not that. There is more to it. Again, I'm not saying we should take everything he's saying in this manifesto at face value because it's obvious he's trolling to some degree. But if the media is going to take it at face value when it benefits them to attack Republicans or to attack Trump, then we should look at what else is said that would implicate other groups. Question: why did you carry out the attack? His response: to create an atmosphere of fear and change in which drastic, powerful, and revolutionary action can occur. Finally, to create conflict between two ideologies within the United States on the ownership of firearms in order to further the social, cultural, political, and racial divide within the United States. This conflict over the Second Amendment and the attempted removal of firearms rights will ultimately result in a civil war that will eventually balkanize the U.S. along political, cultural, and most importantly, racial lines. So we could see here from this comment, just on its own, that he's admitting right here, if we were going to take this at face value, that he wants to encourage division. He wants things like gun grabbing to occur. He wants to have conflict among racial lines. So what does the media do immediately? Well, they come out, it's all about whiteness. It's about white nationalism. It's about, we need to get rid of guns. And I'll get to people like AOC that blamed NRA, an organization that's not even operating in New Zealand, for this attack. And we see that New Zealand, in fact, has already started to change their laws to be stronger against guns. So this is exactly what he's saying in the manifesto he would like to occur. Yet you don't hear this in the media. In the media, they're just saying, oh no, he's just a right-wing racist. Continued. Question: why did you choose to use firearms? Answer: I could have chosen any weapons or means. A TATP-filled rental van, household flour, method of dispersion in an ignition source, a ball-peen hammer and a wooden shield, gas, fire, vehicular attacks, plane attacks. Any means were available. I had the will and I had the resources. I chose firearms for the effect it would have on social discourse, the extra media coverage they would provide, and the effect it could have on the politics of the United States and thereby the political situation of the world. The U.S. is torn into many factions by its Second Amendment along state, local, cultural, and most importantly, racial lines. With enough pressure, the left wing within the United States will seek to abolish the Second Amendment, and the right wing within the U.S. will see this an attack on their very freedom and liberty. This attempted abolishment of rights by the left will result in a dramatic polarization of people in the United States and eventually a fracturing of the U.S. along cultural and racial lines. Again, we see exactly what he's saying here, that this is something that the attacker's saying. He wants division. He wants fighting. The reason he chose guns is because he knew that people on the left can't help but make this story about guns. And that would lead to an erosion of rights, which would then lead people on the right saying, no, don't take away our rights, and would cause this division. So we should seek to not give the killer exactly what he wants in order to say, oh, it's all about guns and things like that. He's fully admitting, and he's right, that he could have used many other materials to be able to accomplish this. Now, there's a reasonable discussion to be had was if he used something like a bomb or a van for an attack or things like that, would the numbers of killed and harmed been as high as they were? I don't know. Maybe that's a discussion worth having. But the fact is, he knew, and he played the media and played the left wing because he knew exactly what they would do. He chose guns because he knew that in the past, that's an issue that balkanizes them to say, aha, And he even says, most particularly, not just cultural, but racial lines, because he knows that this will be used to say, guns bad and white people bad. We already see this with Trump, which I'll get to an article from The Hill he'll hear later, where he's talking about, he did post something about Navy SEAL, but that was more of the trolling. It has to do with an internet meme. But we'll see how he was absolutely correct in that he predicted exactly what the media would do, and he was absolutely correct in that, which it should be troubling to the media. You would think after they've made fools of themselves over and over with the Smollett case, the Covington kids, the Kavanaugh situation, all this other stuff, that they would learn not to jump the gun on these things. But here they are doing exactly what was predicted by this terrorist. Next part that I thought was relevant. Are you a conservative? Is the question asked. Response: no, conservatism is corporatism in disguise. I want no part of it. So here we have, now if you were just to turn into the mainstream media, they're telling you that, this is conservative, this is right wing, this guy's basically a MAGA supporter, he's a Trump supporter. He's saying in his own words, though, that no, he's not a conservative because he thinks that that has to do with corporatism. He'll also go on, as I'll get to in a bit, where he condemns capitalism. Now, imagine if the media was 90% Republican or 90% in favor of Trump, as opposed to what it is, 90% against Trump. And the narrative could easily be, eco-fascist who hates guns, used guns to try to get guns taken out, and he hates capitalism, and that's why he was engaged in these actions. You know, communists killing people. We need to go after people like Bernie. Bernie needs to call out this. All the people that are against guns need to call this out as something terrible because it was done in their name. That would be nuts. We would all realize, no, that's crazy. How could you blame someone who maybe has some criticism of guns or has some criticism of capitalism for the actions of this insane murder? That wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. Yet, that's exactly what's done on the opposite hand. And we even have the press conference, people are asking Trump, you condemn this, you condemn white nationalism. And they're aghast that he says he doesn't think white nationalism's increasing in stark numbers. Which, by the way, he's right. What's an eco-fascist? An eco-fascist would be someone who seeks control and to determine, seeks centralized government control to make sure, and power over people to make sure they're not damaging the ecology or the environment. So, one could extrapolate, one of the things I said with and I'll get more to the eco-fascism in a moment, but one of the things I said with the dangers of this new Green Deal and things like that was that if you truly believe the world's dead in 12 years, or we only have 12 years to fix it, what are you willing to do then to stop that end of the world from occurring? So if you think it's from environmental reasons, what are you willing to do? So there certainly could be extremists that were out there killing people and trying to make a point saying, you're killing the environment. We need to take drastic measures to be able to stop the environmental pollution, which we'll get to here in a second. So let me further read what's going on. Question: where are you a Christian? That is complicated. When I know, I'll tell you. Okay, so it's not quite so simple as a Christian that hated Muslims. He's saying that it's more complicated than that. Not really much to say there. Question: where are you a fascist? Answer: yes. For once, the person that will be called a fascist is an actual fascist. I'm sure the journalist will love that. Again, this goes along with him trolling journalism again. He continues: I mostly agree with Sir Oswald Mosley's views and consider myself an eco-fascist by nature. The nation with the closest political and social values to my own is the People's Republic of China. Well, that goes against the media narrative, doesn't it? So he calls himself an eco-fascist, which is saying that he's heavily concerned about environmental things like climate change. He says that the government that he most thinks represents his views is the communist government in China, the authoritarian communist government in China. Now, but this isn't the narrative that you're hearing. This isn't what the media is blasting. This isn't what people that are seeking to use this to attack Trump or Republicans in the United States are saying. Again, from this statement alone, just that little segment I read you, you could, as a media, say, communist-loving environmentalist terrorist attacks Islam because they pollute too much. That could be the narrative. It would be straight from his manifesto. Do I think that narrative's correct? No, it's a small part of what he's saying. And again, he's also trolling a lot in this manifesto. But the inverse is also true. When they say, white supremacist, extreme right-winger attacks. Well, those, what he just advocated, that's not right-wing, that's extreme left-wing. Communist government of China, eco-terrorism, extreme left-wing. So it's not that simple. Again, the killer was very smart. He wanted to create division. That's his primary motivation. at least what I can interpret. So he's purposely taking positions that he knows, some of which are on the left and some of which are on the right, because he's wanting us to say, aha, see, he's concerned about environmentalism. This means Ocasio-Cortez is to blame. Or, aha, he's concerned about immigration. This means that Trump and his followers are to blame. And that we have that fight and create this racial and cultural division. Instead, as I was saying yesterday in my video, we should all say, it's okay to have different positions. We shouldn't blame anyone who has these positions for this murderous psycho-terrorist. And we could argue against each other on these positions, but we shouldn't think that each other are evil just because we have disagreements on political positions. That's what he's counting on. He's counting on us hating each other because we have disagreements. No, Muslims don't deserve yeah, I criticize Islam all the time, Zalim. And I think what you just said there is absolutely disgusting. Why would these innocent people deserve this? That would be the equivalent of saying, well, Catholics deserve to die because the Catholic sex abuse scandal. So the people in my local Catholic church, if someone goes in and mows down 49 of them, they had it coming. Absolutely disgusting. Now, Pat Acker, I will say that if we're honest with ourselves, though, Islam is by far more dangerous in the world right now than Christianity has. Certainly Christianity's done things in the past, but to me, Islam is uniquely worse as a whole. But again, that doesn't mean we judge individuals based on the faith they're practicing. I criticize things like political Islam all the time. I would criticize things like, I'm for separation of church and state as it is. But it's a very nuanced discussion. But to say that because someone belongs to a certain religion that 49 innocent people that were just praying deserve to be mowed down is absolutely disgusting as far as I am concerned. But it's funny, as I'll get to later here, if you try to have a nuanced discussion, then you get crap from both sides. So the people that hate Islam think that I'm some Islamic sympathizer because I said that these people didn't deserve to die. And then the people that want to defend Islam think that I'm a terrible person because I criticize Islam sometimes. That's fine, though. I'll take the barbs from both sides. Yeah, go ahead, Pat. I'm going to keep going, but you can tell me what you disagree with particularly. So yeah, you can see how, just based on that, the media narrative that this is just some far right-winger white supremacist isn't exactly what he's saying in the manifesto. Next two questions. Question, where are you right-wing? Response, depending on the definition, sure. Next question, where are you left-wing? Answer, depending on the definition, sure. You see, he's saying he's both. He has tendencies from both the left and the right. That's, again, showing, to me, I think when you read between the lines, that's what he's really trying to do. He's trying to create division, and he knows the best way to do that is to be able to say that there are people that we can't help ourselves. Anytime an attack like this happens, and I've talked about this before, anytime there's some kind of terrorist attack or something like that, people on all sides, and myself included, I include myself in this, your gut feeling is, oh, I hope it wasn't something that someone who agreed with me, And so when it's the other side, now we could blame them, like take the Las Vegas shooting. There were people on both sides of that, one side saying, oh, we know that this is someone who, it's probably a right-winger. And then you had people saying, no, it's probably an Antifa-type left-winger, and trying to, focus on that. So he knows that human nature is, we're going to look for the things he says that we think are opposed, the groups that we're opposed to, and say, that's the reason for his attack. It's because he's a communist sympathizer. It's because he's an environmental terrorist. That's why he did it. Or the opposite side. It's because he's a Trump supporter. He must support Trump. He hates immigration. He's a violent right-winger. So yeah, it's just more example. He says he's both left and right-wing, which it's probably true. Next question. Where are you a socialist? His answer. Depending on the definition. Worker ownership of the means of production? It depends on who those workers are, their intents, who currently owns the means of production, their intents, and who currently owns the state and its intents. So he's saying that in some form he would be a socialist. This goes along with the idea of fascism as well, where he's saying, yes, I am a fascist. And so he's saying, well, I would be a socialist if the right workers were controlling things. That goes along with this idea of authoritarianism of fascism, where he's saying, I just think that people that I support should be in control of everything. Again, though, this would be him. He's not denying. He's saying in certain instances he'd be a socialist. Does that mean that we should blame Bernie Sanders? Bernie's, he has socialist ideas, therefore he's responsible. No. In the same token, we shouldn't be blaming Donald Trump. On to that. Next question. Where are you a supporter of Donald Trump? Answer. As a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose? Sure. As a policymaker and leader? Dear God, no. So he's saying, yeah, I think Trump's a symbol of whiteness, and so I'm for that, but I think he's a terrible leader. So as a symbol, he's good, but not as a leader, the only actions he's taken place. Now, people are using this to say, aha, see, this guy thinks Trump's a white supremacist. But whose fault's that? Is that Trump's fault? Because he's admitting, he's saying, no, as a leader in the policies he's done, no, I don't support them. So what he's saying is he's a symbol. Well, who made Trump the symbol of whiteness? There's an argument to be had. Maybe Trump did some of the actions he did himself. But I think there's a compelling argument to be made that the constant cries on the left and from people in the media saying Trump's a racist, having a MAGA hat's like having a KKK hood, etc., that constant drumbeat that is controlled by all the cultural institutions of power in the United States, the entertainment industry, academia, mainstream media, Silicon Valley. That's what created the symbol, which I think is egregious, that Trump's somehow a white supremacist, he's somehow a racist. It was more based on that than anything Trump said. So if you're going to criticize and say, this is somehow Trump's fault, no, it's the media also for making him that symbol. So let me read the chat here real quick. Funny, Jay. I get it. I get your joke, Jay. I'll take the mantle of redneck. I'm not a very good one. But it doesn't bother me. I enjoy the people. I enjoy living in rural Pennsylvania. But I get the joke, what you're saying. More of the manifesto. Question. Why focus on immigration and birth rates when climate change is such a huge issue? Answer. Because they are the same issue. The environment is being destroyed by overpopulation. We Europeans are one of the groups that are not overpopulating the world. The invaders are the ones overpopulating the world. Kill the invaders, kill the overpopulation, and by doing so, save the environment. Do you see? This is kind of so it's not yeah, I get you, Jay. But this is what I'm saying. So he's saying, yes, the reason for killing these people is because they overpopulate. And he's not wrong when you look at birth rates in Islamic, and he talks about white fertility rates going down in other parts of this. Like, those statistics are actually true. So if you were someone that thinks that for environmental reasons we need to stop overpopulation, and you look at a community and say this community populates more than, say, European communities where the birth rates are massively declining and fertility rates, then you could decide you want to kill people for environmental reasons. Does this mean that everyone who's concerned about the environment is responsible for this attack? No, this nut job is. But again, this isn't what the media is telling you, because it doesn't fit their narrative to say, oh, a big part of the reason he did this was because he's concerned about climate change and the environment, because they want to make that a moral issue. To them, that's kind of this religious issue. You're a denier if you're against climate change. We have to do everything. It's going to kill us all soon. Oh my God, it's so terrible. We need to do everything we can to fight this. And again, I've said this before. If you take Ocasio-Cortez and the people on the left that are so concerned about climate change at face value, if we look at the numbers, right? How much, even if the United States completely stopped carbon emissions today, which would be impossible, that would still only be about 18% of the emissions in the entire world, which would mean that we still have to curb emissions in the rest of the world. So if it really is as dire as they're saying, at what point will we start attacking the big polluters like India and China? Because we're going to have to stop them by force. If we truly believe the rhetoric that we're all dead in 12 years, if we don't make a massive change in 12 years, then that's the end of the world. That's the problem. It's the same problem with the people that said, is it okay to punch Nazi? And all Trump supporters are Nazis, or Trump's a Nazi, or wearing a MAGA hat's a KKK hood, and all of that. When you set that up, when you're that hyperbolic and you make these type of claims, there are people that'll take that crap seriously and say, oh, well, I got to fight Nazis. I got to fight the KKK. So it's within my rights to go. Not only is it within my rights, it's my duty to punch Nazis. It's my duty to attack anyone that wears a MAGA hat. If you're making these environmental claims and someone really believes what you're saying, you mean the world is done in 12 years if we don't do something massive about climate change? Well, then I need to do, as an individual, I need to attack the heaviest polluters. This person takes a racist tax and says, or a bigoted tact and says, well, I think it's because Islam has higher fertility rates and overpopulation's driving pollution. Again, I'm not saying the environmentalists are responsible for this person committing these attacks. Only this person is. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy of the media just having the narrative go one way and say, oh, it's all about Trump and his supporters and it's racism and it's right wing. But that's not the case. If we look at his manifesto, again, which admittedly he's trolling a lot, and we have to be critical of, does he actually mean what he's saying here, or is he just trolling us? But still, it's clear to see that the media is spinning a narrative and they're ignoring things that they find inconvenient to their narrative. Next question. Why do you blame immigrants and not the capitalist? Answer. I blame both and plan to deal with both. Okay, so he started off attacking Islamic people, but he claims that he will go after capitalists as well. Now, how does that fit the narrative that this is somehow a right-wing? I thought capitalism was more of a right-wing thing. But he's saying that they're the problem as well. Could it just be that this person, as I said initially, just wanted division and knew that by his actions, by saying, I hate capitalists, I hate immigrants, he's taking positions that he knows that both the left and the right have, and then he's knowing that they'll feud with each other and this will create a bigger feud. That's what I said the entire time. Yeah, and Jay, you're absolutely right. It was meant to divide. That's exactly what I was saying before you came on. That's what the idea was. I don't know if he's a spook or not. I mean, there's certainly that conspiracy angle towards it. And it's worth discussing, I guess, but I don't have any proof that he is at this point. But the outcome's the same, regardless if he was or not. Whether he was officially on some government or some wealthy person's payroll, or he acted out of his own actions. He was right that this would create division. He was very smart with that. And it has. Which is, again, why I was saying yesterday, what can we do as individuals? We continue to have our political... You shouldn't change your political beliefs or your thoughts or your philosophical beliefs based on what this scumbag did. But what we should do, you should hold on to those beliefs. You should be vocal about them. You should debate people. But we also understand that we can have differences with people, and that doesn't mean they're evil. That doesn't mean that we should attack them. When we come out and we vitriolically blame people we perceive as our opponents for this massacre because this guy, he intentionally had positions from both sides of the aisle, then we're feeding into exactly what he wanted. The solution to it is, what can we do as individuals in our lives? Well, we understand that we don't blame people for crap like this. We don't be hyperbolic. We don't say, oh, just because I disagree with you on immigration or climate change, that you're responsible for this massacre. And instead, we recognize that we can have these debates, and they're on serious issues, but we don't think that our opponents are evil while we're doing it. That's the first step. Everything that we talk about in politics begins with ourselves. We have to go out and act like we would want to see our politics act. So that's one of the reasons for my channel. This person, one of the reasons I hate him so much is he's antithetical to everything that the original reason for this channel was. To show that the very first reason for my channel was to show that we could have disagreements but still not hate each other. And this person's showing the exact opposite. He's betting on, nope, we can't do that. That the disagreements will lead to people blaming each other for murder and will lead to more division. And so it's up to us, we need to do our small part, and then hopefully that's modeled out elsewhere to be able to do this. Next question. Almost done with this manifesto. Question. Did you always hold these views? Answer. No. When I was young, I was a communist, then an anarchist, and finally a libertarian, before becoming to be an eco-fascist. So it's clear that, communism, anarchism, most of that could be considered on the left. Libertarian, it depends. Mostly that's considered on the right. Eco-fascism, that would be something that, again, does the label really matter, left or right? No, not really. I mean, he's a scumbag. But the narrative that you're getting from the media and from all these cultural institutions of power that I said was violent right-winger. Now go to everyone who's right-wing. Condemn, 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 condemn. You have to condemn the right-wing. You have to condemn white people. It's white nationalism. Next. Question. Are you a Fed, shill, Mossad agent, false flag, patsy, infiltrator, Antifa, glow-in-the-dark, etc.? Answer. No, but the next person to attack could be, so healthy skepticism is a good thing. I mean, again, he's a master-level troll. I mean, we were just talking about, is he potentially a spook? The question is, does it really matter? So, I mean, he's even trolling to that level there, because he knows that there are all sorts of different groups that'll be analyzing this. You have the media people, both on the left and the right. You have the conspiratorial people that'll say, oh, he's some kind of agent. So he's playing all of those groups seeking to cause division. Last part that I'll highlight. Question. Won't your attack result in calls for the removal of gun rights from whites in the United States? Answer. Yes, that is the plan all along. You said you would fight to protect your rights in the Constitution. Well, soon will come the time. So he's admitting, yes, he knew that his attack would call for gun restrictions, for calls to remove the Second Amendment. He was right. We already see it. We already see in New Zealand. I don't know exactly what... I'm not going to comment too much on what the laws of New Zealand are. First, if the people of New Zealand decide they don't want access to firearms, that's on them. That's not my country. I don't want to speak too much of it because I'm too ignorant of what the laws in New Zealand are. So I'm not going to focus too much on that, but we can clearly see he was right in this country. Ocasio-Cortez blamed the NRA. Now think of the insanity of that. The National Rifle Association, not the New Zealand Rifle Association. The NRA has nothing to do with New Zealand, any of their gun laws. They're not lobbying in New Zealand, etc. Nothing. And yet Cortez blames them for these attacks. If based on things like in his manifesto, we can see from what I just read, if anything, the people attacking gun rights could be blamed for the attack based on his manifesto just as much. How disgusting is it for her to come out and do this? And this is the epitome. I mean, this is just one example. It's occurring over and over, but this is the epitome of the disgustingness of blaming your political opponent for this atrocity. Absolutely disgusting. So now we're blaming an organization in the United States to protect the Second Amendment for a massacre that occurred halfway around the world in a place that doesn't have a Second Amendment that organization doesn't operate in. So I assume then the equivalent of that would be, so the next time there's an Islamic terrorist attack, which happens quite often, more often than these attacks that we see here, can we blame CAIR, the Center for American Islamic, I forget what the R stands for, but, you know, they're an organization in the United States that sticks up for Islamic beliefs and Islamic people. So can we blame that American organization for a terrorist attack that maybe occurs in, I don't know, Turkey today? That Islamic terrorists would come out? No, that's insane. Can you imagine a politician saying that? The media would drum them out. They would be lampooned for weeks. Oh, you know, Senator Rand Paul blamed CAIR for a terrorist attack. This is racism. This is bigotry. He's saying that, you know, we can't have a defense of Muslims in this country, or somehow that leads to Islamic terrorist attack. And they'd be right to call him out, but you know the media would do that. But when it's the opposite, where's the media calling out AOC? Well, they're not going to call him out because the media is with AOC, and they hate the NRA, and they hate the Second Amendment. And so because of their narrative, they will selectively take things that occurred in this attack and that were written in this manifesto and use it to attack gun rights, use it to attack right-wing people, use it to attack Trump and his supporters, use it to attack people like Candace Owens that was mentioned. But they'll ignore all the other stuff. They'll ignore all the environmentalism and the threat of climate change. They'll ignore the fact that he said that communist China is the government most like his. They'll ignore the fact that he said he wants to kill and go after capitalists. They'll ignore the fact that he said he knows the left will use this to take guns away, and that's one of the reasons he did it. The truth is, neither side in this country or around the world should be saying it's the Republicans' fault or it's the Democrats' fault. It's the fault of this psycho. That's who did it. Have I ever seen Berserk as in the anime? Yeah. How did he get all the weapons? That's an important question. You know, and who are the other three people? Very little of that's coming out. Now, I have more to say on this, so, now, there was also, and you warn people, right? And I've warned people on the left, when it comes to this guilt by association, and, you know, it didn't start with this, but the earliest that I can in this current cycle, you remember when David Duke came out and was like, Donald Trump's not such a bad guy, you know, blah, blah, blah. And the media was like, do you condemn David Duke? Do you condemn David Duke? You condemn David Duke? David Duke, do you condemn him? You didn't condemn him strong enough. Oh, you must support David Duke. Oh, David Duke. Oh, you said nationalist. Well, that's a word that's in white nationalist. So you must be a white nationalist. You must be a racist. You must like David Duke. You like the KKK. Over and over and over. I've talked at length. I did an entire video on the kind of scumbag routine of the Charlottesville thing and how, oh, Trump never condemned Nazis. He never condemned the KKK. When that's not true. He gave 3 speeches where he condemned them. The only thing was it was kind of clunky language of his and stupid of him to say there were good people on both sides and bad on both sides because he should have known the media how they would spin that. But he was right, at least in spirit, that there are people that could, for good reasons, say we don't want these statues taken down. And there were certainly good people that said, no, we do want them taken down. And there were certainly bad people on both sides, as we saw, you know, the Nazis, KKK people, and then on the other side, the Antifa types. He was right in that spirit. But the media needed to control the narrative. And remember, they spoke up, oh, Antifa, they're great. They're fantastic. They're just fighting fascists. And then little by little, we see, oh, nope, as people like me said all along, they're violent thugs. They're fascists themselves using violence to try to get their way to argue politics. Right? But I've been warning them, like, look, you warn people on the left. You're like, this monster will come to bite you. This guilt by association. This hyperbolic trying to blame people for crap they are not connected to. And so what do we see? There's interesting footage you can find of Chelsea Clinton. And she's approached by this activist who's basically flipping out and saying it's Chelsea's fault that this attack happened because Chelsea said she didn't like what Ilhan Omar said. Do you see the insanity of what's happening? If you're an establishment left-wing politician or you're someone who's on the left and you're for these outrage mobs, like going after people like Tucker or, you know, blaming Trump when an attack like this happens, just remember, eventually that mob will come for you. You say the slight wrong thing and bam, now all of a sudden you're guilty as well. Guilt by association. I'm just reading some of the chat here. But yeah, I mean, so now we can see that even people on the left. So I guess here's this person's claim. You can't call out Omar if you think she made an anti-Semitic claim. And if you do, then that means that if Muslims get killed halfway around the world, you're at fault for that. So I guess then, if you truly believe you can't challenge possible anti-Semitism because by challenging possible anti-Semitism, you're leading to Islamophobia. Do you see the insanity of this? Now remember, when the synagogue was shot up in Pittsburgh, you know, everyone wanted to say Trump, 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 Trump. Even though the shooter said he didn't like Trump. Because Trump's actually a big supporter of Israel. Which, you know, more so than almost any past president. Whether you agree or disagree with that, that's clearly the truth. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. You know, he's taken all kinds of steps to defend Israel. He was against the Iran deal, which was a big thing that Israel was really upset about. Hey, what's up, Jaded? So, certainly, it was absurd to try to lump this on. And there were people, you could say, like, look, there seems to be a right. I'm not saying that I think exactly what Omar said was anti-Semitic. I'm not saying that. That's a very nuanced issue. It could have been, but I don't have proof it was. And so I'm not going to condemn her for anti-Semitism for that. But I said certainly you could see a rise of anti-Semitism on the left, where you see tons of people like the Farrakhan's of the world calling Jews termites, and he's palling around with, you know, Barack Obama, members of the Congressional Black Caucus, and a lot of other Democrats. You see university campuses saying, we could bring on people from, you know, Hamas, we could bring on people from Palestine to speak, but you can't bring someone from Israel to speak. You see all sorts of this type of stuff, right? But we couldn't say, and we shouldn't have, by the way, that they were responsible for the shooter in the synagogue. No, it still had to be Trump's fault. And this is kind of the irony. You remember when Scalise and a bunch of Republicans got shot in that ball field? Who did the Democrats blame? So you had a Bernie supporter shooting Republicans, and the Democrats said, it's Trump's fault. It was Trump's rhetoric. They ignored the fact their rhetoric. They ignored, you know, calling Trump a Nazi, calling his supporters white supremacists, etc. They ignored their rhetoric, and they just seek to any violence, no matter what, it's Trump's fault. It's always the Republicans' fault, according to these people, right? And so we see the same thing here. Once you step on that bandwagon, then it's only a matter of time before if you get slightly out of line, then you're blamed as well. So now Chelsea Clinton's being blamed. So based on this lady that's an activist that's screaming at Chelsea, if she's saying refusal to condemn, or the Chelsea condemning Omar's statements led to this attack, does that mean that, let's say, some white people were killed in a racist attack? Does that mean that everyone that condemned Steve King's statements are now responsible for white people being killed? Of course not. The insanity of this is just, I mean, I don't even know how to articulate. It's mind-blowing. Calling out hatred, even if you're wrong about it, but calling out perceived hatred, not saying I wish violence upon Ilhan Omar or anything like that, but saying, hey, we think what she said could have been offensive to Jewish people. Again, I didn't come out and say that. But the people that did, they're not then responsible because halfway around the world some psycho killed a bunch of people who happen to be Muslims. It's unbelievable. The hubris it would take. And again, it's filling right in to the motivations that this killer wanted, creating this insane division. We should place the blame squarely where it belongs, with this killer. Now, there's some issues I want to talk about that are more nuanced than this. And here's one of the things. And again, I'll say, yesterday I did a live stream about this. It was one of my most watched videos I've ever done, which is only like in the 3,000. I don't have a lot of reach or anything like that. But for me, that was good. And it was the first video I ever did where I had more downvotes than upvotes. And I think the big reason for that was because people were basically accusing me of being an Islamic sympathizer or, virtue signaling or things like that. Here's the truth. I don't care. I'm just going to say what my opinions on things are. And oftentimes they're not going, if you're a real critical thinking person, oftentimes things aren't totally black and white. And most issues, there's some nuance to them. And so by having that nuance, you're going to get attacked from people on either side that want to be black or white on either issue. So I don't care. So what I want to do is, I've talked about the things that I think are cut and dry at this point, that I think with the media ignoring parts of the manifesto that don't fit their narrative, and the media obviously spinning this, and this feeding right into the terrorist mindset. But I want to talk about two issues that are a little more difficult, so a nuance. The first is this idea of, there are a lot of attacks that occur against Christians or that occur by Islamic terrorists, and they aren't covered as much. And that is absolutely true. And that's worth discussing. So why did this get more attention? There's two reasons. One is the narrative reason that we've been talking about. And that is absolutely true. But we can't place all the blame there, because there is something unique about this situation, why it got so much coverage. And that's because the nature of how it was basically shown live as he was murdering people. That alone warrants more attention being paid to it. It's the same thing if you read like analysis of the Vietnam War. And one of the reasons that people say that there was so much pushback by people in the United States of Vietnam was it was the first war where we actually had like reporters there live. We were getting pictures back basically the day they were taken. We were getting video of the atrocities that were occurring like in real time. And so that led to it having more of a conversation and people having more of a reaction to it. It's the same thing here. I do agree with those on the right and those that, again, I hate saying right and left. I agree with the people that conventionally agree with me that are saying that are critical of the media, that the media picks and chooses which stories to cover. That is absolutely true. But you can't only put that on that and this, because the idea of the GoPro and basically filming this live is something that was unique. So it's not that cut and dry. I don't think we could just say, the reason that they didn't cover where was it, in the Philippines, Coptic Christians were bombed in church, 30 of them killed like a month ago or a couple weeks ago. Yeah, and it's terrible that that wasn't covered. Don't get me wrong. But had the person went in with a gun and a GoPro and killed Coptic Christians, I bet the media would have covered. Not as much as they would have spun the narrative to how they wanted. They wouldn't have covered it wall to wall like they're doing with this shooting, but they would have covered it more. So I think, I'm just saying, it's not a really important issue, but I'm just saying it is nuanced, and we should be as honest as possible. So I do think there is something that was different with this attack that we need to talk about. The other thing that's worth talking about is, so I got all these downvotes. What do they call that? Ratioed, right? And I think, like I said, it's because I didn't just come out and say, screw Islam. You know, and there is this mentality. Zhao Lim on this chat said here earlier, well, Islam's done all these terrible things, therefore, you know, the abuse that occurred to them. Or there's people, it doesn't matter. Or there's people that will say, not quite as an offensive way, well, you know, these religions don't belong in first world countries, and so I feel bad that these people were killed, but this stuff's inevitable. I'm against that type of idea. And see, I get your, like, bird of the abysses here talking, being, you know, sarcastic talking about this. Of course we shouldn't submit. The problem is when you become so... I'm not going to be someone that tries to blame the victims in this incident. They are individuals. Everything that, you know, what I stand for more than anything, right, left, Republican, Democrat, whatever, is trying to have some civility and trying to judge people as individuals, not based on groups. I hate identity politics, period. I don't think that we should look at people based primarily on immutable characteristics like their gender or their race, and I don't think we should look at them based on the actions of other people that are in the religion they're in, or other people that are in the economic class that they're in, etc., things like this. So, like, for example, with Occupy Wall Street, I think a lot of what the bankers did was disgusting. I think that we're going to see another real estate collapse, a bubble burst, and things like that, because no one went to jail for the crimes they committed in this. However, does that mean that every banker is a criminal? No, you still need to be able to show that each of these people as individuals engaged in unethical behavior. And then we should punish them to the fullest extent of the law. But we see this mistake being made in the left. Oh, all rich people must be immoral. No, that's not true. Point to me the specific rich person and show me how they are immoral, and I'll stand with you in condemning them. But to just lump everyone based on merely their wealth that they must be immoral because they're in that group is wrong. That's everything that I'm against. And so I'm not going to say, oh, well, because Islam does terrible things in other areas of the world, these people had it coming, or, you know, it was inevitable, and so we should, you know, and our focus should be on why Islam is bad on that immediate aftermath. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Having said that, I'm someone who criticizes Islam, particularly the politicization of Islam in countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia. I've criticized the so-called refugees that are coming in, which are more economic migrants. I've criticized this stuff, I think, as strong as almost anyone I know in my position. You know, I don't have the reach that some of these, you know, bigger players have, but I criticize that all the time. I criticize the idea that I think a lot of left-wing people and globalists want to destroy national sovereignty. They want to bring in people of different demographics and different beliefs to collapse these countries because they want a globalist system. I criticize that all the time. Yet, just because I say, well, I don't think that these people had it coming, or that I have sympathy for these innocent individuals that were just praying that were killed, that somehow makes me a virtue-signaling sympathizer of Islam? It's ridiculous. I will fight those people on the right, the identitarians on the right, as strong as I'll fight the identitarians on the left. I'm not going to judge people based on the fact that their religion, other people involved in their religion do crappy stuff. There is no evidence that I saw that any of the people shot broke any laws or were engaged in any sort of violence. Regardless of it, it's the same thing I think of like the Dreamers in the United States. Do I agree with the policy? Do I agree with the idea that we're basically kowtowing to illegals and making some of them legal? No, I don't. Though the Dreamers is more complicated. But you see what I'm saying with a situation like that. But I don't blame that individual for taking advantage of the bad laws that our country has written. So I don't blame the individual Islamic people, whether they be migrants or not, for the situation, the laws that allowed them to immigrate in New Zealand. And I think that it's absurd. And yeah, you know, so you have someone like, I'm only kind of reading here, but the Bird of the Abyss. There are people that so viscerally are against Islam. And there's a lot of reasons, particularly, you know, we could get into it, right? Like, I think the best example of kind of the insanity of Islam that I could come off at the top of my head and the discussion around it is go check out the YouTube video where Sam Harris is on Bill Maher's show and Ben Affleck's there. And Sam Harris is articulating a very nuanced position. Again, it's easy to be lazy and just say everyone who says Islam's bad, kill them all, or get them all out of all the first world countries. But that's wrong. Particularly in our country, the United States. You're allowed to have whatever, you know, it was founded on the idea you can worship however you want until you start to harm other people. So if someone in their home wants to defend Islam or wants to be Islamic, that's fine. Now, implementing Sharia law or engaged in practices like female genital mutilation, things like that, yes, that's all unacceptable. But not every Islamic person's doing that. And so Sam Harris makes this nuanced argument where he says, and this is a big deal, I'm going to screw up the numbers, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. Let's assume there's 3 billion Muslims in the world. He says, like, maybe 5% of them are actually, like, people that would be engaged in groups like Al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Islamic terrorist groups, that would use violence in the push forth of their religious ideals. Clearly, we condemn those people. But the problem's not just those people. It's the next 15% or so that would say, oh, well, we won't personally strap a bomb on ourselves, but we praise the people that do. We think they're doing, our religion's work. And there's like 15% of the people that say that. And then there's another group, like 20% beyond that, that's like, well, we're not really calling for that, but we won't condemn it either. So you're basically talking about between those three groups, like maybe 1.5, 2 billion people. Or, no, that's way too high. 1.2 billion people? 1 to 1.2 billion people? Like, that's a huge problem. And we see that there's all kinds of terrorism done in the name of Islam around the world. And as someone who identifies as Christian, I could also say that, to me, I'm not someone who looks at the words of the Bible and takes them literally. The idea of being Christian to me is to be Christ-like. I look at the major religions of who were the central figures in the religion. So compare Jesus Christ, who basically was, for all intents and purposes, a peacenik hippie, versus that of Muhammad, who was kind of a warlord. And I think that you start to see that. Is that to say, then, that there's never been any damage done in the name of Christianity? No. It also doesn't mean that everyone who's Muslim is engaged in terrible behaviors like those of Muhammad. It doesn't mean that either. But you can see why, in today's world, I think there is more terrorism and abuse that comes from the Islamic religion. And in fact, I wish I'd have pulled it up, but according to recent studies in the past 2-3 years, the most persecuted religious group in the world, worldwide, is actually Christianity. There's more Christians that are being killed in areas around the world, etc. Now, having said all that, I articulate this stuff all the time. Does that mean that I hate the person that's an individual Muslim? No. I personally know Muslims that are fantastic. And I argued yesterday, and I've argued before, if we really want to see a change in Islam, then we should be supporting those who believe in Islam and are reformers. People like Majid Nawaz. People like, I gave this story yesterday. It's something it's a story that really fires me up. The Muslim in New York that tried to set off the bomb. His father then called and said, before the bomb went off, and reported, no one died in this attack, I don't think, but he reported his own son to the authorities that he might be an extremist. So that was a Muslim reporting his Muslim son for possible extremism to the authorities. The authorities did nothing. Bomb goes off. Thankfully, no one's killed. Kid gets arrested. And a bunch of people, because they hate Islam so much, say, boycott the dad's restaurant as well. Why? Because he did everything right? It's ridiculous. And that's what I'm talking about. It's nuanced. It's not black and white. So I don't care that there's a bunch of people that think I'm a terrible person, or they're going to downvote me, or they think I'm virtue signaling, or somehow, selling out to Islam by saying these people didn't deserve to die. And if you think they deserve to die, or you think it's their fault for being in the country, then you might need to look at yourself in the mirror, because you might be as every bit of extremist as the Muslims that you try to be calling out. That's my feelings on it. It's easy to just be black and white, but oftentimes things are far more nuanced than that. So let me check out the chat here real quick. Islam's a religion of Congress. Okay, that might be true. So what's your solution then? Brother the Abyss? We kill all Muslims? These people had it coming? We ban Islam? What's your solution? I don't understand what we're supposed to do. Okay, let's say you firmly believe it. The best thing we could do is try to support the moderates. You might say, yeah, well, they'll lose in the end. Then fine. But are we going to start judging people for pre-crimes? You can't worship in a certain way? Okay, fine. Let's say we do that. What do you think the next group that would come down? Well, we better get rid of those evil conservatives too, right? We already see the media pushing that. Conservatism. The moderates will always lose to the extremists. It'll eventually lead to white nationalism. Let's ban conservatism. Can't you see that it's evil? That it'll always be terrible? Yeah, if that conservative, hey, you wore a MAGA hat in Chicago and you got stabbed for it, hey, that's your fault. Shouldn't have been in Chicago. What can you say? Those stabbers, they had the right to do it, It's probably a good thing. Some could say it was righteous for them to stab that MAGA hat guy in Chicago. He shouldn't have been there. They're just trying to take over the people in Chicago. They're trying to infiltrate them and have an invasion. You see how insane? And again, I criticize Islam all the time. But you can't just say, What are we supposed to do? Yeah, ban Islam. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I'm sure that won't lead to violence or repercussions. Let's see other things. Like, why don't we just ban, we see, for example, how the mainstream media, academia, Silicon Valley, entertainment industry are basically trying to censor conservative or right-wing points of view. So that'll just end. That'll end, right? Oh no, it's actually creating a resurgence where right-wing beliefs are becoming even stronger than previous. Because when you try to silence something, the tighter you squeeze your fist, the more it squeezes out. So if we try to ban Islam, all you're going to do is create more violence. You'll create more sympathy for the movement, and you'll enable the extremists to further control the movement and the religion. It's a terrible idea. Yeah, China and Japan, they're good models. Has Japan banned Islam? I don't want to live, I would rather live with freedom and the fact that knowing that there is some inherent danger in that freedom than live in an authoritarian government that tells me how I may worship. That's exactly what the country of the United States is founded on. If you feel so strongly, then I guess move to China. I'm sure that it'll be great for you. Everything will work out fine. It's just, I just don't get it. You know, it's, yeah, whatever. Now, one of the other things I wanted to talk about this is, why do we, yeah, of course, there have been extremists that have declared, and yes, we should go after those elements. I get it. We should use our words. Again, let's go back to this. This is something that I'm always talking about in this channel. So there's two ways of looking at things. What is morally the right thing to do? I think clearly you're morally wrong in the sense that we should ban a particular religion. I think that's morally incorrect. I think that's against the foundations of what this country stands for. And as soon as we take that first step and we say, well, this religion's so heinous that we could ban it, then it's a small skip and a jump to saying the next religion or the next political ideology, and eventually we end up in authoritarianism. So I'm all about personal freedom, knowing that there are inherent risks with that. But let's take out the moral section of it. Let's take the strategic section of it. You look like an extremist when you start making these positions. And then the people in the middle that maybe you could convince, like, look, there's a problem with mass immigration. There's a problem with a lot of these people that are kind of Islamic leaders that secretly want to infiltrate the first world countries or the second world countries and implement Sharia law and things like that. You lose all voice you have with the people that are in the middle that would be willing to listen to you because you come off sounding like a crazy extremist. So strategically, when we say things like, well, these people had it coming, or, well, you know, it's the fault of them for being there in the first place, or we need to ban all Islam. You're making a huge strategic blunder if your ultimate goal is to end violence that occurs within Islam. You're going to drive people to extremism. You're going to drive people to sympathizing with those extremists and sympathizing with that religion in general. You're going to lose people that would be willing to listen to you otherwise because you come off sounding like an extremist. And you basically become the very thing that you're preaching against. Let's see. Right. So it was like, you know, one of the things I said, like after 9/11, like you're making the argument for massive government control. So it was after 9/11. We were worried, and don't get me wrong, 9/11's a huge deal. And we should have went after those responsible. I get that. But we were told we were attacked for our freedoms. And so in response to that, we signed the Patriot Act and gave up more of our freedom. Makes sense, right? What our own government did in response to its own population, massive surveillance, massive removal of the Fourth Amendment, you know, our right to privacy. That's more of a victory than bin Laden than anything he could have accomplished by just militaristic means. It's the same here. Oh, we hate Islam because it's an authoritarian controlling religion that's based on murder and things like that. So we need to get rid of the concept of liberty and freedom in order to fight it. Yep, makes sense. So then we'll just become our own version of Islam. No, I disagree. So, hey, what's up from Serbia? Cool. The last thing I want to say is, so there's all this, like, all these people say, was this killer left-wing or right-wing? I don't know that we are always all using the same definitions when we talk about left wing and right wing. For me, I like the way Jordan Peterson defines it, where he says he looks at it in terms of hierarchies. And so it would be this. He starts with this assumption. If we could all agree that there are some things in life that are good or that are necessary, and so we could be very simple, like food. Food is good. As soon as we acknowledge, which makes sense, we all need to live, so we need food or water or whatever. As soon as we acknowledge that, then hierarchies are inevitable, because inevitably there'll be people that are better at obtaining food, obtaining resources, and people that aren't very good at it. And so we've created a hierarchy, and there's infinite hierarchies. How good are you at baseball, at public speaking, at whatever your particular job is, at finding someone of the opposite sex, etc., etc. There's tons of hierarchies going on at the same time. And so right-wing people are people that understand that hierarchies are important and inevitable, and that we need to defend them because it's important to understand that there are people that are really good at particular positions, and that's what enables us to grow as a society the most. Left-wing people say two things. They say, well, one, we need to always be checking the hierarchies to make sure they're not changing from competence, which competence means the person who's the best at getting the food is at the top of the hierarchy, to corruption, which is, it's not so much are you the best at getting the food, but maybe you had the right connections or you use corruption to be at the top of that hierarchy, even though you're not the most competent. So that's one thing the left does. And the left also says, and we also have to look out for those people at the bottom of the hierarchy that aren't that good. And Peterson argues correctly that we need both of those things happening simultaneously. That's how I define the right and the left. That's just my personal definition, what I choose to use. Other people define it as, just Republican, Democrat, or conservative, liberal, etc. There's all sorts of ways that you can define it. And so I don't understand this idea of how we automatically assume that like any kind of racist is right wing. If you're a white supremacist or you're right wing. Is a black supremacist white wing? I don't know. But you always hear that white supremacy is right wing. Why is my question. I would argue that you could make a case for that being a left wing as well. Because to me, it's obvious, at least in the United States, that the left is the side pushing identitarian politics massively. So they say that and I talk about this in almost every video, but it's a form of cultural Marxism where you're not an individual. Instead, you're based on a collection of your group characteristics. So I'm not Rob nor the individual. I am white. I am straight. I am overweight. I am kind of poor, I guess, etc. And so each of those categories is then are either an oppressor or an oppressed. And it's more advantageous to be in the oppressed group because you get all kinds of victimhood points, etc. And we have to fight back against the oppressor groups, etc. That's in a nutshell. I talk about this in more length elsewhere. So what white nationalists are saying is really, yes, we agree with that we're all part of a group based on race. You're not the individual. You're either white or you're not white. They're just saying the white people are the oppressed. That's it. They just flip who's the oppressor and the oppressed. So isn't that more like left-wing than right-wing? Now, I'm not going to say, well, that proves that white supremacists are left-wing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, though, that we can... The label doesn't mean much. What connection do I have? Let's say we call this killer right-wing. Okay. What connection do I have to him? The mistake we make is then saying, well, if someone happens to be ideologically, we have this line, left and right, and if someone commits a heinous attack on, here's the middle, and on your side of that, so if you're right and someone, even if he's white, you're only, here's the middle, so this is probably showing up reverse on the camera, I just realized, but here's the middle, so, maybe I'm right here, I'm just a little right wing, but if someone way over here commits some attack, then everyone on this side of the middle is responsible for that attack. That's ridiculous. And you see this all the time. The idea, and it's constant. Let's go back to the idea of David Duke. Well, immigration. Well, white supremacists, people like David Duke, are with Trump on wanting to stop illegal immigration. Okay, so who cares what their opinions are? They're scumbags. There are legitimate reasons to oppose illegal immigration and want border security. I give them all the time. None of them have to do with racism or anything like that. And so you constantly see this, though. Just turn on CNN. They'll call it's the brown scourge, the brown menace. Trump and his supporters are worried about the brown invasion. No. And for you to say, well, because this person over here, that's what David Duke's concerned with, and he agrees with you, therefore you must be doing something crappy. Well, let's take that to then its logical extrapolation. Again, the left always want the Democratic Party. And again, I just have to say for clarification, if you're a Democrat, I don't mean you individually. I don't mean everyone who's a Democratic politician. I'm talking about the people in power and these cultural institutions, the mainstream media, the entertainment industry, and Silicon Valley, and academia. That's the groups I'm talking about. They constantly want to do this kind of guilt by association. So, okay, let's take David Duke specifically. David Duke came out in support of LNMR. Well, geez, I don't remember all of these institutions saying, Omar, do you condemn David Duke? See, there it is. The Democrats are the party of the white supremacists. If you defended Omar, if you're in the same party as her, then you're in the party of David Duke. Didn't hear any of that. Only when it was on the Republicans. Isn't that strange? Or how about Louis Farrakhan? They're connected to him. Never a question. A week before the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, he said that he likened Jews to termites. Didn't hear any of the Democrats that pile around with him having to answer questions for that. Why is that? And it's like I was talking about earlier. Let me give you another example, right? I haven't talked about this one. The people that are basically open border people, they're in agreement with a bunch of corporations that want cheap labor. And some of them are the very same people that were occupying Wall Street and criticizing these corporations. So does that mean anytime, because they're ideologically on the same side as on illegal immigration, if a corporation goes out and does something unethical somewhere else, well, hey, you that are for open borders, you're responsible for that. You're responsible for everything that corporation does. And it's just, and then, my favorite example is, I want to get to this article here in a minute. Nationalism, right? I call myself a nationalist. And there was a big argument because Trump called himself a nationalist. And they said, no, you can say you're a patriot, but not a nationalist. And, nationalism, that's terrible because it's a word that's in white nationalism. And it's like, okay, well, if that's the game we're going to play, then I guess the Democratic Socialist that you now see being front runners in the Democratic Party, that word socialist was also in the word National Socialist, which are the Nazis. So does that mean Bernie, then by calling himself Democratic Socialist, is a Nazi sympathizer? Oh, no. That's how silly this goes. By the way, in the concept of nationalism, like they say, you should say patriotism, not nationalism. Here's how I would define it. Let's look at it in the family structure. A patriot is someone that would say, I love my family first and foremost. I think it's the greatest family in the world. A nationalist is someone that says, I love my family first and foremost. I think it's the greatest family in the world. And every action I take is to benefit my family first. That's the difference. And that's why I support nationalism. I think that our elected officials should be looking out for the interests of our country first. Not foreign aid to other countries, not concerned about the plight of refugees trying to get in. No. As long as there's people struggling in this country, which there are plenty, as long as there's problems to be solved in this country, which there are plenty more, then that's what our elected leaders should be doing. They should be nationalists. But they're trying to make that a bad word, again, because the idea is to have this globalist system. I know, though. I'm an Islamic sympathizer, so stupid. So let's get to this. This is just one article. So I read, just because I dislike the mainstream media doesn't mean I don't read them sometimes. I try to read stuff from, I watch YouTube people like myself. I like Jimmy Dores on the left. I'll listen to Joe Rogan. I listen to Shapiro sometimes. I don't agree 100% with anyone, but I also read, I'll watch Tucker Carlson. Sometimes I'll watch left-wing people like Jake Tapper. I read The Hill. I go to Drudge Report a lot. I go to Zero Hedge. So I try to use different sites. The Hill is a site that I like that admittedly leans left-wing, but they have a lot of good stuff, particularly on the corruption that's going on at the FBI, so I read them a lot. But I wanted to read this article to you, at least parts of it, from The Hill today. And it says, questions sharpened for Trump after New Zealand massacre. And here's some of it. It says, Friday's mass shooting in New Zealand is sharpening scrutiny of the rhetoric of international political figures, including Trump. Even trenchant Trump critics have not accused him of a direct line of culpability for the shooting in 2 mosques that left 49 people dead. It was the worst shooting in New Zealand's modern history, but the massacre has reinvigorated criticism that Trump has empowered extremists and Islamophobes globally since his 2015 call for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. Now look, Trump said that, but the policies that he advocated were never that. The policies he advocated were the same countries that Obama said that were a problem, that we should stop temporarily accepting people in from them, which I didn't disagree with them. I didn't think it was the biggest criteria or the biggest problem to be able to solve Islamic extremism, but certainly it was something that it didn't seem racist to me, particularly because there were plenty of other countries that are majority Islamic that weren't on the list, etc. So was it racist when Obama said these countries? No. So anyways, George Salim, Senior Vice President of Programs at the Anti-Defamation League, declined to be drawn into specific comments on Trump in a Friday interview with The Hill, but said, "You need look no further than what the alleged shooter himself said about political leaders in the United States." Oh, well, Mr. Salim, very interesting, because he also said that elected leaders would come after our guns for this, because they're stupid and they want to cause racial division. Funny, you don't talk about those elected leaders. He didn't say anything about Trump. He said Trump was a symbol of white people coming together. That's what he said. But the reason he's that simple isn't because what Trump said. It's more because of how the media have spun it. The alleged shooter, whose name I won't mention, is said to have published a lengthy manifesto. In the question and answer section, the person addressed the question of whether he was a Trump supporter. As a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose, sure. As a policymaker and leader, dear God, no. Now, it's funny that The Hill here, so clearly they've read the manifesto, but they're only focusing on that part about Donald Trump. Isn't that strange? Now, for those of you who were listening earlier, I went through and talked in that same Q&A section, in the same manifesto, all the things he said that would be against the narrative of the left. But they totally ignore it here. And again, the reason I'm picking The Hill is because I actually like them more than most of the... I don't think they're as far out there as many of these other left-leaning sources. Yet even they are picking and choosing for their narrative. Continuing. White House aides have pushed back fiercely on suggestions that there is a common thread linking, however distantly or indirectly, the rhetoric used by Trump and the actions of this killer. Kellyanne Conway said it was wrong to see symbol of white identity. I think you should cover the entire manifesto if you're going to cherry pick a piece of it. She's absolutely right. That's what I'm saying. Earlier in the day, White House Communications Director Mercedes Schlapp blasted an attempt to link the shooters to Trump. Is outrageous. But then here's the part I really wanted to talk about. But Trump fueled the controversy on Friday afternoon when he pushed back against the idea that white nationalism was a growing problem. Quote from Trump. "I don't really think so," Trump told reporters in the Oval Office. "I think it's a small group of people that have very, very serious problems, I guess." Now, do you see what they're saying? Well, here's what happens. This terrible attack happens. And then they asked Trump, well, clearly this attack happened, so you have to admit that white nationalism's on the rise. And he's like, no, I don't think so. And that's somehow problematic for him to say that. That is ridiculous. That would be the equivalent of, let's say, let's think of a group that you don't see in mass shootings. Let's say that you see an Amish person go into that actually did happen, but go into a school and shoot people up. Are they then going to ask Trump, do you think Amish violence is on the rise? It's like, well, no. This was a nut that did something crappy. The media wants to have this narrative. They won't have the narrative the opposite way. There could be 5 Islamic terrorist attacks in a month in the United States. And they would be like, well, this doesn't prove that Islamic terror is on the increase already. There'll always be nuts. But when it's the opposite, white nationalism needs to be on the increase. It must be on the increase. This is the constant drumbeat. This is the disgustingness of the media. You could see them salivating when this attack happened. Absolutely disgusting, because their narrative is, this country and the world, white people are evil racists. They're the worst. And so anytime that something can be laid at the feet of white people, or, then we have to condemn it. We have to condemn. Oh my goodness, white, it's just white. It's so bad. It must be on the increase. This situation happened. So we have to really, what do they mean? Just because this attack happened, then Trump has to say, it must be increasing. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It could be increasing, but it doesn't mean that it certainly is. And for them to be like, well, they ask a question and they know the answer that they want. And if that answer is not given, then somehow that's indicative of, oh, Trump's a racist or Trump's ignoring the problem. No, not at all. Show me let's see the proof. Violence, for example, you often hear studies about violence against women. All violence against anybody is bad. Violence against women is bad. Don't get me wrong. When I was in debate, we had this argument that would occur all the time. And there was a topic one year that had to do with whether or not we should overturn a Supreme Court decision. I think it was... I don't remember the name of the court decision. I'm sorry, I'm at a loss. But the gist of the decision was this. A woman was assaulted sexually on campus, and obviously the assaulter was arrested, and she civilly went after the rapist or the assaulter. I don't know if it was actual rape. But then she tried to sue the school as well using the Interstate Commerce Clause, claiming that because the school received business from people out of state, that they could be financially held accountable because she was attacked. And the court said, no, that wasn't the case. And so one of the topics was you could overturn that case. And they would say it was all about the case. It had nothing. The people that were defending this rarely were talking about the specifics. They were just like, violence against women's bad. And the court signaled that they don't care about violence against women. And so one of the things we would say in response, and the numbers back this up, even from women organizations, was that actually there's been a steady decline of violence against women. Every year the numbers have been going down. And so, again, does that mean we should stop looking at violence against women? No. But we're doing good. The numbers are going down. You could look at the same type of chart when it comes to shootings and violence and things of that nature. They tend to be, historically, if you look over like a 30-year period, they're all going down pretty significantly. So if a shooting happens or a rape happens against a woman, you don't then just be like, ha! This proves that rapes against women are going up. Ha! This proves that shootings are going up. It's like, well, no, it doesn't prove that. This is a terrible tragedy. It's a horrible... Tragedy is not the right word, by the way. I wanted to convince myself. It's a terrible terrorist attack. A tragedy is something different altogether, which I'm not going to get into. But what I'm saying is, so for them to just put on Trump like, see? Because they want Trump, they want that narrative. They want Trump to be like, yeah, I guess white nationalism's up. See, all white people, it's all the evil white people. And you already saw it. You saw like a professor come out and say, oh, it's whiteness. You've seen tons of people. It's whiteness, it's whiteness. Now, I'm not someone, I don't care. Just because I'm white, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I'm not someone who's claiming to be a victim. I don't care. I'm one of the luckiest people that have ever lived on this planet. One, I'm already in the top 98% of luckiest people that have ever lived because I was born in this time frame. Second, I'm in the top 90% of those people because I was born in the United States. Third, I'm in the top 90% of those people because I have relatively good health. Fourth, I'm in the 90% of even those people because I had two parents that stuck together and that encouraged me and did good. So I'm like 99.88 or 99.99888% lucky of the luckiest people who've ever lived in the world. By the way, as are people that were born today, live in the United States, etc. So I'm not claiming to be a victim. That's not what I'm saying. But when you look, like, what other groups can you say? Can you have actual college curriculum that are the evils of this particular race or the evils of this particular gender? Or we need to take down, less people of this race or gender need to have say in things, etc. Tim pulls a right-wing shield. Good stuff, Bird. Your sarcasm game's strong. Anyways, so we clearly see there's a lot of hate going out against white groups. Now, one of the arguments that used to be made in the left all the time was that you couldn't be racist unless you had institutional power. This is garbage. Any of us could be racist. You could dislike someone based purely on their race, regardless if you have power or not. That still makes you a racist. But there is some truth to the fact that the racism could be worse if you have the power to do something with it. So what are the institutions of power currently that are for white people, that are abusing other races? Academia is almost totally against white. The entertainment industry, mainstream media, Silicon Valley, it's all about these other groups. And it's not just whiteness, it's also maleness, it's also heterosexuality, it's also Christianity. All of these groups, from the cultural Marxists that are deemed the oppressor groups, Yet the media still, they need to push it further. That's why the Jesse Smollett case was so tantalizing. That's why the Covington case was so tantalizing. They need to push this narrative. Evil white people hurting minorities. And so they go to Trump and that's what they say. You know, that's the question they have for him. Oh, it's problematic. Because Trump didn't say, yeah, white nationalism's increasing. He fueled the controversy. What does that even mean? And this is why, so I did this, I think I did a video on the resolution condemning Ilhan Omar and how it was stupid. Now, there were two things I talked about in that video. The one was, this was clearly a deflection by the Democrats who didn't want to have to admit that there are people in their party, including Omar, that said things that seemed to be against just Jewish people. Again, I'm not saying that I thought her comments were anti-Semitic. I think she's probably an anti-Semite, but those comments weren't proof of it, and I don't have proof of that. So I'm not going to act as if I know. But they wanted to deflect from that, and they have to, because they have to take that. The nature of the game the Democrats play is where they want to say everything anyone else says is racist or bigoted. So they can't then just dismiss what they say is racist and bigoted. Though they're trying, and they get away with it more because they control all of these cultural institutions of power, and so they don't have people holding their feet to the fire like a Republican would. But nonetheless. But the second thing that I thought was absurd with the resolution was their way of deflecting was to say, we're going to condemn all hatred, condemn all bigotry. Okay. That's not hard to make a resolution that says that. It's stupid. I see that it's a deflection, but fine, fair enough. That's not hard. And they weren't even, their cultural Marxism is so strong that even in a symbolic gesture to deflect blame away from them, they couldn't accomplish that. They had, you read the resolution, it lists every group you could think of that could possibly be offended. It says minority groups. You know, they're even talking about Sikhs, you know, other groups like that in there, Hindus. No mention of men or Christians or white people. I wonder why. Isn't that strange? And then they go on to condemn specific actions that were all terrible actions by white people. They didn't mention San Bernardino. They didn't mention Mateen shooting up the Orlando nightclub. I wonder why that is. Because it's all about signaling. It's all about this narrative. This idea that somehow it's, there's a problem with white people. It's white people that are the problem. Is there a problem with white supremacy? Yes. Those groups suck. So are groups that are black supremacists. So are groups that are Hispanic supremacists. Yeah, I hate identitarian politics. I will fight against the people on the right that engage in that. White nationalists and things like that. You heard me doing it earlier in this video. But the idea, we're led to believe that it's just like every street corner's got a Nazi on it, you know? The KKK's running rampant through, the halls of Washington are, filled with racists that are just salivating to attack black people and Hispanic people or gay people. It's absurd. It's a garbage narrative that's put to try to design to drive a wedge into us, ironically, just like this killer was trying to do. And the killer knew. He knew that the media and that these people in these positions of power couldn't help themselves. And they would chomp at the bit at the chance to do that. They would ignore the things they found inconvenient to their narrative and just push the things they found convenient. And a lie of omission is just as important as any other lie. And so they don't talk about the fact he says that the communist China is his favorite government. They don't talk about the fact that he's a rabid environmentalist that thinks we need to stop environmental pollution. That's why we need to kill people. They don't talk about the fact that he's anti-capitalist, that he's anti-conservative. Nope, all that's pushed to the back burner. And so Trump doesn't get asked. It's funny. Let's say I was a reporter. After I heard that reporter ask, couldn't I have asked the follow-up question? Mr. Trump, are you worried of the fact of environmental terrorists increasing? Would you like to respond to that? Weird. They didn't ask about that. They're only concerned about that hatred, that one part of it. Oh, whiteness. Yeah, it's white. Let's go after that. And it just shows, and again, this isn't, CNN. This isn't the Washington Post. This is the Hill. Yes, they're left-leaning, but they're not normally that bad. Then the article goes on to talk about Charlottesville. Look, I've talked about it a million times. Let's see if they have anything else here. Most recently, Trump called himself a nationalist during an October 2018 rally in Texas. The remark was seen by his defenders as encapsulating America first. But it was seen as something more sinister by his critics. Salim, who was the guy I mentioned earlier, who served the administration of George W. Bush and Obama during the first 6 months of Trump, noted that when hateful rhetoric is allowed in our public square without condemnation, it gives the green light to extremists to speak up. And in the case of New Zealand, act on it. And in the case of the Pittsburgh synagogue, act on it. In October 11, people were killed in a shooting at the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh. Robert Bowers, who's been charged with carrying out the mass killing but has pleaded not guilty, allegedly posted anti-Semitic and extremist xenophobic views on the internet. In the aftermath of the Christchurch mass shooting, Representative Tlaib released a statement that she was so angry at those who follow the white supremacy agenda in my own country. In November, Tlaib and Omar became the first Muslim women elected to Congress. Well, that's funny. Let's look at the order of the things they talk. They're talking about the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. We have people, Tlaib and Omar specifically, who supposedly said things that were anti-Semitic. Again, not my interpretation, but what a lot of people on the left and the right said. But they don't say, you didn't see Tlaib saying that, quote, she was so angry at those that follow the anti-Jewish agenda in her own country. When after the synagogue shooting, when people like Omar and things are saying things like that. I wonder why that could be. What white supremacy? Who are the people that Tlaib's talking about? White supremacy agenda in our country? Trump? Is that who she's alluding to? Absolutely ridiculous. The only thing that matters at this point was the skin color of the person shooting and the religion of the people that were shot. That's all they care about. They don't care about all the other stuff that he supposedly said. They don't care that he basically admitted, hey, I know this will cause division along racial lines. Don't care at all about that. Continuing here at the article. Nahad Awad, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, Executive Director of Council on American and Islamic Relations, said on Friday that since Trump's campaign for presidency, Islamophobia has taken a sharp rise and attacks on innocent immigrants and mosques have skyrocketed. Okay, attacks against conservatives have skyrocketed. If you wear a MAGA hat, it's considered a KKK hood. There's incident after incident of people in MAGA hats being attacked or people that are conservatives being attacked in varying degrees. So where's the calls for that? And what does these attacks, the Council on American Islamic Relations, what does that have to do with something that happened in New Zealand? It's ridiculous. They only want to focus on, they act like it's just a one-sided thing. That only people, it's Trump's rhetoric needs to be judged, but no one else's rhetoric needs to be judged. So when Scalise gets shot in a ball field and the shooter said the reason was because Obamacare, because they wanted to remove Obamacare, and you had tons of people in the media saying, oh, Republicans that want to move Obamacare, they're killing people. They will literally kill people. They said, no, our rhetoric has nothing to do with that shooter. But Trump saying, hey, there's a problem with Islamic terrorism, or hey, we need to shore up the borders. Now all of a sudden that's a rise in anti-Islamic attacks and things like that. Look, if we're looking at the numbers factually, we can see, if you're just looking along racial lines, I know this isn't the same as religious lines, but on religious lines, let's look at that. I already showed that, worldwide, it turns out that Christians are actually considered the most attacked group in the past recent years that are singled out and attacked. Now, if we're looking just at the United States, if we look at racial lines, regardless of motivation, this is why, I'm against the idea of hate crimes. What does that mean? What's the purpose of it? If you're killed, does it matter that the person that killed you did so for your religion or they did so for some other reason? Or, for your race or for some other reason? I don't really think so. I don't understand why we have laws like that. But if we just look at the facts, and I'm not trying to besmirch any particular race or anything, but there's way more, the majority of races commit crime amongst their own racial group. So this idea of white supremacy running amok and running around killing black people is not true. Most white people are killed by white people. Most black people are killed by black people. Every study has showed that. That's been the case for decades. We've known that to be the case. However, when it comes to cross-racial violence, there is far more instances of people that are in minority groups issuing violence against white people than white people issuing violence against minority groups. Now, does that mean we shouldn't focus on white racists that are attacking minority groups? No, not at all. Does that mean that, minority groups are somehow inferior or more dangerous or something and we should judge individuals for that? No, not at all. But those are the statistics, and they're ignored in favor of this narrative that this is a white supremacist country that's out there attacking minorities. That's not the case. That's not true. And to use an attack that occurred in New Zealand for someone who's putting out views of both being on the left and right and saying, I'm specifically doing this to cause division along racial lines, to specifically take that example and try to apply it to America and use that for political points, whether you be one of these representatives like Tlaib, or you be the mainstream media, or any other politician or group that's trying to do that, is disgusting. And we know that. Let's see. Yeah, and I mean, that's the other thing, like, we're talking, like, and I said this yesterday, the truth is, we could take steps, and we always should, to ensure that things like this are limited. But the truth is, no matter what, there will always be insanity like this. It just will always happen. You know? So, again, you know, my conclusion to all of this, yesterday I was more focused on, I still give sympathy, my heart still goes out to that community, to all the people affected, to innocent Muslims out there that, you know, maybe you're afraid for their safety in their places of worship. That sucks. And I do sympathize with that. And I sympathize with the community of Christchurch and New Zealand as a whole. You know, and I wish, you know, my thoughts go out to them. But, you know, today I wanted to focus more on what I alluded to, I knew would happen, was how people would use this, you know, and again, I'm biased. I get it. And let me just say, yes, there are people, I haven't seen them, I haven't seen anyone in a position of power, really. Like, by that I mean someone with a big audience, like in the media or a politician, use this to attack the left wing with and saying, oh, environmentalists, see, this is why we should be against the Green New Deal. I haven't seen anything like that, but I do admit I am biased. I'm someone who's coming from the right. And so, as such, there's a chance that I'm only seeing what I want to see. So I'm fully open to someone providing examples of why that isn't the case. But I knew this would come. People would use this for their own political benefit. And it's disgusting. Oh, here's the other thing I wanted to talk. I forgot about this. Another one of the difficult issues I wanted to talk about. One of the arguments you could make on the left to a lot of what I'm saying, and again, by left, I mean maybe someone who disagrees with me. Left, right doesn't matter as much. Uh-oh, I'm going to have to get more water here soon. Yes, I'm a Christian. Anyways, one of the arguments that you could make against me would be, okay, well, if you're saying that only this person should be responsible for this heinous terrorist murderous attack, then that would also apply that if a Muslim commits some kind of heinous attack in the name of their religion, that only they themselves should be judged, and we shouldn't look at the religion or the groups that they belong to. And no, I disagree with that. I think it's more nuanced than that. First off, I'm not just saying just judge this person, this killer. We should also look at the direct groups that he was involved with. We should look for his reasoning for what he says and try to find, you know, look between the lines on this manifesto and take his words, what he said. And we should look to people that was connected to him. So it's not just him as an individual. But, and this is one of those things that's nuanced. It is more nuanced. There is more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as black and white as that would appear. Well, if you're only, and here's why. Because when Islamic violence is being done, it's a pattern we see occurring over and over and over and over again. And the people that are engaged in it, I'm not saying everyone who's a Muslim, we should judge their crime because it was as a result of their religion. For example, if you're a Muslim and you break and enter into someone's house and you're stealing a TV and then you shoot the person when they come in, is that the fault of Islam? No. But if you're carrying out terroristic attacks saying, this is in the name of my God, this is in the name of my religion, and that's happening over and over, and we see a pattern, and not just that, but then we see a pattern of people that aren't engaged in those attacks from the same group saying, well, we praise these attacks, then it's worth looking at that. It's worth looking at what's causing those. I think this situation is different. You know, we're not saying, because this guy, if this guy, for example, maybe it'll come out that, I don't know. I think he was from Australia. And again, I have to plead ignorance. I don't know what the political parties in Australia are. But let's say it turned out he was the equivalent of a Democrat in Australia. You know, does that mean that we should then look at all that group in Australia? No, that's clearly different. And I think that is a complicated and it's nuanced. And I would love to have a debate with someone that maybe disagrees with me because I can understand that it's a very nuanced position. But I do think that we're able to look at, you know, by the same token, right? Do I think that every Catholic person is responsible for the child sex scandal that we saw? No. But is it worth mentioning that this happened a lot in the Catholic Church? Yes. It is worth saying that, and it's worth getting to the bottom of it. That doesn't mean I hate all Catholics. That doesn't mean I want Catholicism banned. But we should look at that common thread that we see occurring over and over. The same is true as Islamic terrorism and things like that, which we see happening over and over worldwide. That's not what's going on here. So, let me see what Bird said. Anyways, yeah, I must have missed stuff that's going on in the chat. I don't know what's really going on. The question of am I a Christian? Like it's a complicated question. I would say yes. Like I was starting to say earlier, I don't know that I take every exact word in the Bible in a literal sense. I take it as the idea of to be Christ-like, and so that means, try to tell the truth. Look at the life that he lived in the scripture and try to emulate that as best as possible. That's it for me, and that's where, so some Christians might say, well, it says in the Bible that homosexuality is a sin. Why aren't you concerned with it? Well, because I see Christ dealt with people that were sinners all the time. And he said, leave it to the big guy upstairs. That's how I feel about that stuff. So I don't wear it on my sleeve. I also think that, and at one point I would say I was an atheist for a long time. That's definitely true. But, that's, well, I'll get you in a second there, Bert. So that's something that, I think that I'm not the type of person that's going to go out there, on my shirt sleeve saying Christian, Christian, Christian. I mean, for me, it's more of a private thing, but it does affect, like, the idea of trying to be Christ-like does affect a lot of where I can see. Rob, can you see my messages? I got a few questions. Yeah, I can see your questions. So, yeah, Bird of the Abyss. Yeah, I understand. One, let me play devil's advocate. There are people that could say, but you could take out of context passages from the Christian Bible, and it shows things like violence, which is true. But again, I think to me the crux of the Christian Bible is the character of Jesus, and if we could all interpret things how we want, it was written at a different time. But I think that if we focus on the idea of who the central figures are in the Quran versus who the central figure is in the Bible, we see a stark difference. So yes, I get what you're saying. That the Quran and the Hadiths, for example, the Hadiths even more so, where they talk specifically about the life of Muhammad and kind of what that religion entails. I get it. That I agree that Christianity is better. I agree that there's a lot of problems with Islam based on the tenets of who the founder of it was, Muhammad. I criticize that stuff all the time. We're not disagreeing on that. We're disagreeing on whether these people deserve to be shot, or whether they should not be allowed to practice that religion. We know, for example, like take the West, my practicing of Christianity, I would say that some group like the Westboro Church, right, the Fred Phelps group that's always protesting funerals and yelling about fags and things like that, just these evil, horrible people, they're doing that in the name of the Bible. I think they're misinterpreting it. In the same token, there could be people that are interpreting Islam in a way that is peaceful. I know some of them. They shouldn't have their religion be banned. There are moderates, for example, elsewhere, like Majid Duaz, that is interpreting that way. So it shouldn't be banned and things like that. But yes, I'm with you that I think on the whole, I support the Christian Bible, and I think that it's coming from a far better place than where the Quran and the Hadiths are coming from. So, I mean, go ahead whenever you want to put topics. Well, no, I'm not saying you believe, I misspoke when I said you believe they should be shot. But you believe they should not be allowed to practice their religion. And that's what I'm saying. It is very heinous and disgusting for the people. Like, I saw at least one person say, some people could say this was a righteous shooting. Not saying you said that. That, to me, is the epitome of disgustingness. But then there are levels down from that. They're the next group of people that would be like, well, they should never be in the countries in the first place, so it's their fault they got shot. Even though I didn't want to see them get shot, it's their fault. That's pretty heinous. Then there's the people below that. It's like, well, it's not their fault, but, I don't really, the Islam does so much worse, so what do you expect? Like, that's not quite as heinous. And then there are people like you that are saying, I don't think that they should be allowed to practice this faith. And so I'm not trying to lump you in with they deserve to be shot. I'm just saying that's kind of the grouping of people, the different levels of it I'm disagreeing with. I don't think that you're a morally disgusting person for thinking that Islam shouldn't be allowed to be practiced. I'm trying to give the best possible motivations to people, but I think you're terribly wrong. I think it's morally wrong, and it's antithetical to everything the United States stands for. We should focus on people's... yeah, I'll get to that. 1 second, Jesse. I'll get to the Alyssa Milano thing. So yeah, that's the last thing I'll say really on the Christchurch shooting for now. Again, my solution is there is no solution. Violence like this will always happen. But what we can do is I try and I fail all the time. I fail. Not only do I fail all the time, I fail multiple times daily on anything that I suggest to other people. But one of the things I'm really trying to work on in my life, and when I ran for office, the first thing I said was I want to run a campaign like I would like to see other people run a campaign. And I feel that at each level, we should look at ourselves first, and before we recommend changes to other people, be the change we want to see in ourselves. This is one of the reasons I hate the socialists. I hate like the Bernie Sanders type idea or the AOCs that say, you can only have one house. We need to tax the 1%, but I have 3 lake houses and drive, this awesome car. The amount of money I have is acceptable with everyone else. It's garbage. Be the change you want to see. Start living like someone within their means that doesn't have 3 lake houses. Ocasio-Cortez, start living within your means. You don't need a flashy apartment and things like that. You want to talk to us about climate change, then start leaving a smaller environmental footprint yourself. Carbon footprint yourself. Like, I'm tired of that. Be the change you want to see first. That's how I look at it. And so I try to look at it that way. So when in this particular situation where I see this person was purposely trying to foster division and getting people that disagree with each other to hate each other and resort to picking up arms and being violent against each other, the first thing I could do is to try to continue to understand that I could have civil disagreements with people. I could talk to people that disagree with me. I could take that criticism and still realize they're not an evil person. In fact, many times they're good friends of mine. And so if we all as individuals try to do that, then I think that's one thing we could do the step back. And then once we make that change, it's fair to criticize the groups above us, whether it be, our community or our political party, people that share our political ideology, or people that are involved in groups outside of us, like the media and things like that. But that's the best I got for right now. I don't know. I don't know what else we could do. All right, the Alyssa Milano thing. So, yeah, for those of you who don't know, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I did see the tweet. This goes back to, like, me saying about Chelsea Clinton getting yelled at. Well, before I get to that, Jesse, just a couple more things. That are going here, like Bebop and Bird of the Abyss that are still talking about this. Yeah, we shouldn't stop criticizing Islam. And that's one of the things I said at the top of this video. You should not give this murderer, this terrorist, the satisfaction of changing your beliefs because of an action he took. Ridiculous. So if you were critical of Islam prior to this, then you should continue to be critical of Islam. The fact that these innocent Muslims were massacred doesn't mean that you shouldn't still be critical of the religion as a whole if that's the place you were coming from. And so, yeah, I know that will be what people will do. People will be afraid to speak their mind. I'm not. And again, all we could do is ourselves as individuals. I just did a video. More of us need to speak up and not be controlled by the mob that seeks to silence us when they're using things like this for their political benefit. I just did a video on Tucker Carlson and the fact that Media Matters was coming after him, which you could check out. And Tucker did the right thing. He said, I'm not going to apologize to Media Matters because they're disingenuous. If an individual has a problem with something I said and they thought it hurt them, they could come to me and talk to me and I'll decide whether or not to apologize. But I'm not going to apologize to the mob. That is exactly right. If more of us start standing up to ourselves and not giving into this mob and being silent because of things like this, then I think we'll be in a far better place. No, I disagree. Mein Kampf shouldn't be banned. Neither should the Quran. And there's certainly a difference between the two. But neither should be banned. Right, and then like the idea, Limerick says, like the idea, like, you know, there have been a lot of Christians who I think are right to do so. Even if you're not a Christian, I can see you making this claim, that are tired of like the indoctrination of children in like kindergarten and other groups in like LGBTQ lifestyles. And again, I'm someone who has no problem with gay, lesbian lifestyle. I don't care, but it shouldn't be indoctrinated to children like that. Yet they're called bigots when they bring up this question. But then just recently, there was a community where a bunch of people of the Islamic faith made the same criticism. And because of identity politics, they were listened to. And so you'll see this. This is the problem with cultural Marxism. Many of these groups that are supposedly allied, actually, they're really not. And eventually, right now, they could just focus on the oppressors, and it covers up a lot of the warts of this. You know, and so there will eventually, the LGBTQ people are going to find out the hard way that they're lower on what people call the progressive stack. And the idea is, who is the bigger victim? Well, right now, Muslims are a bigger victim than LGBTQ. Well, maybe not trans. Trans and Muslims, that'd be a tough one. But just general gay or lesbian, yeah, you're lower on that stack than Muslims. And so, shut up. Because once you subscribe to we're all just parts of a group and that's all that matters, and victimhood's the most important thing, well, there's going to be someone, even if you think, hey, that helps me because I'm part of a bunch of victimhood groups, there are going to be people eventually that are more victims than you, perceivably, and they're going to silence you, and your opinion's not going to matter. Hence, Chelsea Clinton getting yelled at. Hence, the situation we see with this Islam, or like my brother's talking about here, with the idea of Alyssa Milano. What she did, she tweeted out and was basically like, she's trying to defend transgender, and she's like, you know, I'm trans, I don't remember the exact words. I'm trans, I'm black, I'm bisexual, I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I'm Muslim, whatever. And she's just saying, I'm all of these oppressed groups. And then members of those oppressed groups were like, no, you're not. And so there you have another example of the left eating the left, where it's like, we are trying to appropriate our victimhood, and you don't get to do that. So even if you're trying to be sympathetic with these groups, victimhood's all that matters. You don't check the right boxes, and so therefore you don't belong to those groups. And, you know, the biggest example of where you see this kind of debate raging is the feminism versus LGBTQ debate, trans debate particularly. And the argument is this, that both of these groups are said to be right, they're said to be victims, but ideologically they're in a paradox, right? A double bind, we used to call in debate. On one hand, you have the feminists saying that there's no difference between men and women, that it's all societal, that there's basically no difference between the genders. So the reason that boys like trucks and girls like Barbies is just because society, and there's nothing biological different, etc. And then the trans argument is, I'm a man who was born in a woman's body. But wait a minute, if it's all just societal, what do you mean you were born in a woman's body? Well, there are biological things that are different. Those arguments don't jive. And you're starting to see like actual feminists, who, by the way, I disagree with most of these third wave feminists, but the very monster they created, where it was all about victimhood and things like that, and fighting the patriarchy, and, you know, the more of a victim you are, the more your voice is allowed to hurt. Now they're succumbing to the fact that, who's more of a victim than them? Trans people. And so now how is this going to work out for women? Well, now you have groups like the ACLU. The ACLU is coming out and saying, well, you know, if you're against trans men, or I don't even know what the correct term is, a biological man transition to female competing in female sports, then you're a bigot. And so now you're some girl or some woman who's trained for 5-6 years, you know, you're in high school and you're in track, and you busted your butt all summer and all through school, you know, because you wanted to make it to states in track. And so you worked so hard for 4 years, and finally you think this is the year, you know, and you get there, and there's a couple people that were born biological males but now call themselves females that have barely trained, that just blow you out of the water. Tough luck. That's cultural Marxism. That's identity politics. You don't get to complain or you're a bigot. That's the insanity of what's going on. Mein Kampf shouldn't be banned. I'm not supporting it. I'm not a fan of book banning. I think that censorship and the ideas of things like that always lead to the ideologies kind of manifesting in other ways. Just like you saying, so we ban Mein Kampf, if it's banned, okay, in certain areas it probably is. And so then what happens? Well, then it goes underground. Then people start listening to it and they take it, they say, oh, if it's banned, that must have a lot of truth in it. Then you have actual people following it as extremists that are engaging in violence. The same would occur of the Quran. You really think like think of what would happen. Okay, let's say I don't know where you're from, Bird of the Abyss. Let's say you're from the United States. So Trump comes out tomorrow and's like, yeah, we're banning the Quran, by the way. No more practice of Islam in the United States. We're banning the Quran. There would be blood on the streets. Do you think people would then say, oh, okay, well, the Quran's banned. I guess I'm no longer a Muslim. Cool. You think that's what's going to happen? And then after the initial, who knows how long it would take, literal conflict, civil war that would result as a result of that. And it wouldn't just be Muslims. You would have tons of people that are against censorship like myself that would be like, no, screw you, Trump, that would be joining their side. And many others. So after that conflict that would be bloody, there would actually be violence involved with that. After that potentially settled down in, I don't know, 20 years, then what would happen would be that the book would still be around. And there would still be people that were practicing Islam. Then what? You would have, I guess you would have thought police. We would then, have police that could break into your house to make sure you didn't have... Did you ever see V for Vendetta? Isn't that... Yeah. We'll break in and make sure you don't have a disapproved book in your home. We don't want you to be a secretly practicing Muslim. Yeah, sounds great. It makes no sense whatsoever. So... What should Americans do in Venezuela? It's a tough one. I don't think that we should be engaged militaristically or anything like that, though I haven't seen anyone suggest that. We should, as much as possible, stay out of the affairs of other countries. Now, if we're sending humanitarian aid and things like that, that's fine. I don't know what to believe, though. On one hand, I'm convinced that the Venezuelan government is incredibly corrupt. Socialism always is. And it's terrible for the people there. But on the other hand, I've been lied to by enough people in this country saying that, oh, well, this time we need to go into this country. So, no matter what we do, we could offer some sort of aid and things like that, but less is more, I think, in our involvement in that, because no matter what, every time it sends up, even initially for a righteous cause, to start to get involved in other countries, we end up propping up some situation that ends up biting us later. So that's my feeling on that. Let's see. I don't get your analogy. If you kill a wolf, will you kill all dogs? The analogy doesn't fit. It's like you're killing all dogs. Does that mean you kill all cats as well? No, but you did kill all dogs. And all the people that like dogs are going to be pretty upset with you, and they'll fight to keep you from killing all dogs. You can't ban a religion in the United States. So we're just going to ignore the Constitution? There's so many things. You're not looking at the reality of it, which I'm talking about, of the actual bloodshed that will result of it. You're not looking at the fact that anytime we try to ban something, heck, even like the war on drugs, you try to ban it and it just resurfaces in more corrupt ways. You're not looking at it that way. And you're not looking at the fact that this is it's antithetical to everything the United States stands for. What are we going to do? Pass an amendment? Is that what you would recommend? Or do we just ignore the Constitution? We say, freedom of religion no longer matters. What do we do when the next person gets in there, when public support against Christianity, which we already see is becoming pretty strong in this country? It's not inconceivable that 20 years down the road they could say, and ban Christianity. What would you do? Let me ask you, Bird of the Abyss, are you a Christian? What would you do if your religion was banned? Would you still practice, or would you say, okay, fair enough, Christianity's banned, I guess I'm no longer a Christian? So, I don't know. I maybe only have like a half an hour more. I'll probably end this when my wife gets home. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is shifting gears, but it is the... So we have testimony from 3 people that have been released, and this has to do with the FBI and corruption against Trump. So there's testimony from 3 people worth talking about. Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, and Loretta Lynch. Now, for those of you that don't matter, just in a nutshell, Lisa Page and Peter Strzok were the FBI, people employed by the FBI that were the lovers that were exchanging all these text messages that said we needed an insurance policy against Trump. They could smell Trump supporters in at Walmart, things like that. Really terrible, horrible people. They had closed-door testimony, and it's finally been released. Now, Loretta Lynch was the head of the DOJ. Her testimony hasn't been released, but it's been reported on by Sarah Carter. I like Sarah Carter. She's someone I think has been very good on these investigations, and so you take it with a grain of salt until we can see the testimony ourselves, but I still think it's worth talking about. So there's three situations a situation with each of these testimonies that I want to bring up, though I think it's definitely there's more in them, but I only have a half an hour, so I'll hit the high points of each one. So first, let's start with the Lisa Page testimony that was made public. The big revelation in that to me was that the FBI wanted to prosecute Hillary. There were people at the FBI that said, we want to prosecute Hillary Clinton, but the DOJ said no. Sorry, I'm just bringing up stuff that I can see. Now, what's the significance of this? Now, remember, the Department of Justice was headed by the Attorney General, who was Loretta Lynch. This was kind of Obama's chief in the Department of Justice. Now, it's often been argued, and I'm one of those, that because I understand that sometimes this comes back to bite you, but my kind of philosophy on you should change yourself first, that applies to the parties as well. So I'm constantly arguing against things that Republicans maybe are defending, that something that like maybe Trump would do or someone else would do, because what they'll say is, well, the Democrats do this corrupt thing, so why shouldn't the Republicans do this corrupt thing? And I'm against that mentality. I think that we should start as individuals ourselves and then start with our political ideology and be the change we want to see. So I don't buy the argument we should be corrupt if the other side is corrupt. So in this instance, what I'm talking about is I think Trump wanted his attorney general to be the same as Obama's attorney generals were for them. And how did Eric Holder, the first attorney general under Obama, describe himself? He was Obama's wingman. And we know that was the case. We could see through things like Fast and Furious, the use of Obama using executive privilege to keep Holder out of trouble and things like that. That the DOJ under Obama, just like the IRS, just like the EPA and these other executive agencies, were merely political tools for Obama to use as a weapon against his opponents. That's what they were. So the Department of Justice got away with all kinds of crap. They weren't actually interested in justice. Anyways, Loretta Lynch at this point is heading it. She meets Bill Clinton on a tarmac. Now, here's why this is significant. She is in charge of the investigation, will be the last person, the person at the top of the heap that will have a say on whether or not to charge Hillary Clinton with a crime involving the investigation into her server. So it is inappropriate for her to be meeting with Bill Clinton in general. That would, think about, imagine if the chief of police is looking into you, and then it turns out they're having dinner with your wife. It doesn't look good. It's just inappropriate. It shouldn't be occurring. But what's even worse is it wasn't that this was a public meeting. This was done in secret. It was on a tarmac. It was over a half an hour. And the only reason, it wasn't like it was done in secret and then Loretta Lynch came out and admitted it later. The only reason it was ever admitted was because, was because a local reporter just happened to be there and see it. And so it was like, crap. We got caught with the hand in the cookie jar. So they were like, oh no, we were just talking about weddings and birthdays and yoga and, stuff like that. Trust us. The fact that, I might cost his wife a chance at the presidency and she might go to jail. That never came up. Absolutely ridiculous. Defies all belief. That's just not what happened. So what happened was people rightfully was like, look, you literally now have she already had a conflict of interest. It's absurd to think that Obama, the agency that's answering to Obama, who said from the get-go, oh, Hillary Clinton didn't do anything wrong. Before the investigation even started, nope, there was nothing there. She didn't do anything wrong. To think that his agency was going to give a fair shake when he knew he hated Donald Trump. And he knows that if she gets charged, she's probably not going to win the presidency. So to think that that was going to be a fair shake, that the DOJ was going to be like, well, yeah, we got to Obama was going to allow that to happen, is absurd. It wasn't going to happen. So even before the tarmac meeting, there was already a terrible conflict of interest. But certainly after the tarmac meeting, it's like, okay, you need to recuse yourself, Loretta Lynch. And she didn't. Now, this is ironic because the very people that on the Democrat side that had no problem with her not recusing herself here were the same people that said, what's that? Jeff Sessions once had dinner with 400 people and there was a Russian there and he forgot to tell Congress, must recuse himself. Oh, what's that, Whitaker? You once wrote a paper saying that you think the idea of special counsel is too overarching. You must recuse. Barr's coming in. Oh, Trump picked Barr. No, he must recuse himself. The Democrats claim it's obstruction if they don't recuse. We need investigation, special counselors. Do everything we can. On and on and on. But when we had an actual cut and dry case of this occurring, no problem. Of the person who's in charge of deciding whether or not to charge Hillary Clinton, meeting in secret with her husband, no problem at all. No need to recuse. And they said, here's why she doesn't need to recuse. Because Lynch came out and said, listen, whatever the FBI says, if they recommend charging her, then we'll charge her. So, in effect, I'm recused without being recused. That's the garbage that was spread to us, right, by this. Let me see, did I miss anything to check? Whatever. Anyways, continuing on. So she didn't recuse herself, but it was all okay because she was going to listen to the FBI anyways. Now comes this testimony from Lisa Page, who says, and this goes along with another testimony that was released by James, I think it's James Baker. Baker is the head lawyer, basically, at the FBI. He also said that initially he wanted to file charges of gross negligence for Hillary Clinton. But then Page is backing this up, where she's saying, yeah, there were several people at the FBI that initially thought Hillary broke the law, we're going to charge her. She says that people from the DOJ, controlled by Obama, headed by Loretta Lynch, told them, no, don't charge her, because even if you recommend charging her, we're not going to charge her. Well, wait a minute. I thought Lynch was basically recused and was going to listen to whatever the FBI said. But instead she ends up, people are out there telling the FBI, it doesn't matter what you recommend, we're not going to charge her. And this is also backed up by the fact that we have text messages that were released by FBI agents involved in the investigation, whose names haven't been redacted, or unredacted, that said that they are laughing at the idea that the DOJ is going to prosecute anyone connected to Hillary Clinton in this. They're laughing at it. They know it's a joke. They're talking in the context of, yeah, it's funny, the guy we just interviewed lied through his teeth. And then the next agent says, wouldn't it be funny if that's the person who ends up getting prosecuted for lying to us? And the original agent just laughs and goes, you really think that the DOJ is going to charge anyone in this case? Because they knew it was a joke. They knew from the get-go. So, and it's not just that. And let me, for those of you who maybe, don't know exactly what's going on, it's often difficult to talk about this because there's so much nuance you can get into. What's the law about gross negligence? What does intent mean? Blah, 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 blah. Here's all you need to know. The most cut and dry case possible. The FBI looks at the Hillary team and says, or I'm sorry, Congress, it was Congress, says, we are subpoenaing the following emails. Hillary's team gets that subpoena. They then decide to delete with BleachBit the emails that were subpoenaed. Now, in 99.99% of cases, any person at any level, it doesn't have to be the FBI, if your local police subpoena evidence from you, and you then destroy it, you will be charged. Period. Bar none. And so, surely that's it. Someone deleted subpoenaed evidence, that's it. But no. The FBI says, well, okay, we're not going to charge that because here's what happened. They had a big pile of emails set up that they planned on deleting, and they just hadn't gotten to them for months. And it just so happened, like, the day after Congress asked for them, that was the time schedule of when they actually needed to be deleted. So, no big deal. Moving on. But then, a Reddit user, a normal person, just like me and you, not some FBI agent, her name was Katika, she finds out that there's a Reddit post that's going on along this time where someone calling themselves Stone Tier, who we would find out to be a guy by the name of Paul Combetta, who was on Hillary's team and was basically their tech guy. He's on Reddit the day that Congress subpoenas these emails, and he's saying, hey, I have a very VIP that I need to remove their name from a chain of emails. Is there any way to do this? So, like, if you send an email to people, you send it either, you know, on this the send to line or BCC or CC. You send, and it has everyone's name. So if I send, you know, to Limic, Bird of the Abyss, and Jojo an email, and then that would later be subpoenaed, we would see those 3 people received that email. He's trying to take, like, Limic's name off there. How do I get Limic's name off and so it doesn't look like they received this email? And the reason is because they didn't want, you can infer who the very VIP was, who was Hillary Clinton, because they didn't want it to be, oh, here's the evidence, or here's the documents, but it never went to Hillary's classified server because she wasn't sent it. And basically he's told, oh, it's illegal, it's really difficult to do, and it would be illegal to do. And he says, oh, I was just trying to put a placeholder in there. So the argument now gets a little more complicated, which I'm trying to make this... Yeah, I agree with you, Jaded, and I know you were really good in that thread talking about it. What Combetta then would say is, it's not that he wanted to... Let's assume the very VIP was Hillary. It's not that he wanted to remove Hillary from receiving the email so it looked like she didn't receive it. He just wanted to remove her email address and just put her name instead. So, for example, if I send Jaded an email, it might say jadedcynical@gmail.com. And so I didn't want people to be able to read his actual email address, so I would just take out the... I would change that from jaded@cynical@gmail.com to just say jaded@cynical, or jaded_cynical. And that's what he ends up saying. And that's... So after he can't find what he's looking for, he then decides to bleach bit all the emails instead. So he knew these emails were subpoenaed, he bleach bitted them, and he said he was told by people to look for a way to change the name on this. So this is cut and dry. There's only 2 possibilities. So we were told, well, the reason that Combetta got away with bleach bitting also was because he was given immunity. So the FBI knew about the immunity, and they said, or the FBI knew about the deletion, the bleach bit, but they'd given him immunity, so there was nothing they could do. That's garbage in its own right, because if that was the case, you don't give people immunity for serious crimes like this unless they're going to turn on someone and you get a bigger fish, but they got no fish, which proves this is garbage. They gave him immunity because, just like those FBI agents said, just like we know from the Page testimony, the DOJ basically put the word out, we're not going to prosecute anyone, so do anything you can. Yeah, and I'll get to that in a second, Jaded. You're absolutely right. And so they decided not to prosecute, so that was the 2 options. So they knew about this, and that's why they didn't prosecute him. So here's the 2 scenarios that could have happened. One, they didn't know, the FBI didn't know that Combetta did this, that he went on Reddit and asked to do this, and that proves that he was engaged in criminal activity beyond what he told the FBI. And because of that, that means his terms of immunity would be violated. So in other words, when they give you immunity, they say, like, what are the crimes what did you do? Okay, here are the crimes I committed. And they're like, okay, we'll give you immunity for those. But if you committed any other crimes outside that or engaged in any other crappy behavior you're not telling us about, then we could revoke this immunity. So that's option 1, that Combetta didn't tell them, and that the FBI is incompetent, and some user named Katika was able to find out more than they were able to. And thus, Combetta's immunity should be revoked. Well, they're saying that wasn't the case. They knew about all this. And so, okay, then the second part of that is, Combetta on the Reddit thread says he was told, they told him to do this. Now, even removing that name and putting a placeholder in, that's still tampering with evidence. If the FBI or any law enforcement agency says, we want your server, we want your computer, we want your emails, we want, just imagine a letter that you've written. You don't get to then put whiteout on the parts of it you don't want them to see. That's tampering with evidence. Even if your intent wasn't to, well, it was no big deal. I just didn't want them to see, that I used a curse word. Doesn't matter. You've tampered with evidence. So the mere fact that even if you buy the garbage, oh, well, we were just trying to put a placeholder. And let me tell you again, I know this is sounding complicated. Let me tell you again why that doesn't make sense. This placeholder argument. Again, the argument is, Combetta, once he's caught with his pants down saying, hey, I'm trying to get Hillary Clinton's name off these emails. And they're like, dude, that's legal. He's like, oh, I just want her email off. I'd still put her name in there, just not her email address. Why? Is he worried that the people that are getting this subpoenaed evidence, i.e. Congress, doesn't have access to Hillary Clinton's email address? Of course they know her email. So who the hell's he hiding it from? The only reason to tamper was because you were trying to get her name or the idea that she got these emails off of it so that the Congress wouldn't be able to see it. Trying to hide their email address, but putting a placeholder. That is the most laughable thing. It makes no sense whatsoever. So again, back to option 2, which is what the FBI is saying has happened. We know someone told Paul Combetta to go in and tamper with this evidence. The FBI has admitted, James Comey admitted in testimony, that someone was Cheryl Mills, who was Hillary Clinton's top attorney. This means that Mills, who had also been granted immunity, committed a crime that she hadn't been given immunity for. Hence, her immunity deal should be revoked. We know that Cheryl Mills also lied to the FBI. She said she had no knowledge of the server until after Hillary was Secretary of State, but emails proved that she knew about it as early as 2009. Yet no one was charged. So this is a big roundabout way of saying, even if you look at it in the most nuanced way, the simplest thing to say is, forget about the server, forget about all that. Hillary's team was subpoenaed evidence, or subpoenaed to give evidence. They destroyed that evidence. No one was charged with it. Period. That's it. Cut and dry. End of story. We now know why that was occurring. You could infer anyways. When James Comey admitted, Loretta Lynch said, well, who, by the way, was supposed to just going to listen to what the FBI said, because she recused herself without recusing herself, right? She told James Comey, don't call it an investigation, call it a matter. And we know that people in the DOJ are saying, look, don't even recommend charges because we're not going to charge them whatsoever. It's too vague. Yeah, and check out the above top secret thread on Combetta. It's a fantastic thread. I thought we all did really good on it. I was really proud of myself there. But, right. Now, juxtapose, and that's a great question, Jay. My contention has always been, every time I'm talking about all of these investigations, the Hillary investigation versus the Russia investigation, is all you want is for there to be equal application of the law. So, for example, let's take something very simple. FARA violations, which is failing to register as a foreign lobbyist. This has occurred in Washington for years and years and years and years and years, right? And they never go after people for it. It's a joke. Everybody knows it. Finally, they decided to go after Paul Manafort. Okay, I'm fine with that. Charge him. It is a law. It's on the book. Charge him. Period. Sounds good. All I ask is then charge people on the other side as well. Now, we know from Mueller's indictment of Manafort that he worked with people like the Podesta Group who were working with Hillary Clinton. The exact same violation. They didn't register. Working with the exact same foreign agents. Shouldn't they get the exact same punishment? No. Instead, they were allowed to retroactively fill out paperwork and weren't charged. It's the same situation here. In every single example, we see the FBI went as light as possible on Hillary Clinton. The FBI went and Mueller went as hard as possible on Trump and people connected to him. Every single time. You post this like on Above Top Secret or other blogs where you talk about this page saying, look, the FBI wanted to prosecute, but the DOJ said no. Remember, Comey said no reasonable prosecutor would ever bring this. Garbage. The head prosecutor at the FBI said he would, James Baker. Other people in the FBI said they recommended prosecution, so Comey's full of it. He's a liar. We know now the DOJ was behind the scenes saying, no, don't charge her. Where are all the people? Where are all the Democrats? Where are all the media people? Nope, nowhere to be found. Move on to the next thing. Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, Jesse Grambler is my name on Above Top Secret. So, real quick, I'll probably have to end here soon. So, let's get to the Strzok testimony and what the important thing from it was. According to the testimony of Peter Strzok that's now been made public, the Department of Justice and Clinton's team struck a deal for what documents the FBI would be allowed to look at in this investigation. That is insane. Now, it's under the auspices of, well, the FBI shouldn't have access to Clinton Foundation emails. That's ridiculous. They should have access to the full server. Now, remember, we have the same Loretta Lynch, ran by Barack Obama, Obama who hates Trump, Obama who has every reason to want Hillary Clinton, who he's backing for president, who he said from the get-go before an investigation didn't commit any crime. His agencies working with Hillary Clinton's team to say, here's what the investigators are allowed to see. Strzok says, in a direct quote from his testimony, it wasn't just Clinton Foundation. He said they controlled the people they were allowed to look at, the time frame they were allowed to look at, the groups they were allowed to look at, like the Clinton Foundation and things like that. Now imagine, think of what this means. You're charged by the FBI or some investigative agency, right? You then get to pick and choose what evidence you give over for that agency to look at you. How does this make any sense whatsoever? It is unbelievable. Imagine this happened with Trump, right? Mueller's team's like, okay, we need to get all this documents from Donald Trump and Trump Jr. And so now you'd have Barr at the head of the DOJ that Trump appointed saying, well, hey, let me talk to Trump's team. So Barr goes and talks to Trump and their allies and their friends, and they're like, hey, yeah, we only want to give him a few emails. And Barr's like, here you go, Mueller. These are the emails you're allowed to look at. There would be riots in the street. People would be calling for the immediate removal of Donald Trump. It would be obstruction of justice. Barr would be called out. All of them. They would demand impeachment immediately. How could this be a fair investigation if the very people being investigated get to pick and choose what evidence the investigators are allowed to look at? And they would be right. I would be right there with them going, yeah, this is bad. This is not good. This is a sham of an investigation if the investigators are only allowed to see evidence that the accused is willing to give over. But there's no talk of it. No one cares. Oh, well, no big deal. And despite this, by the way, here's the real irony of, despite it, people at the FBI still said just the evidence they were allowed to look at was enough to warrant charges. And that was still shut down by the DOJ. And that's the idea of this thing like an insurance policy. It's always multiple levels. Well, we'll stack the deck in this way. And then when we lose on that, we'll have this investigation into Trump and we're able to hear everything he's saying. And then when we lose on that, well, we'll start unmasking people. And then when we lose on that, well, we'll, do everything we can to diminish it. We'll have an ever-long investigation. Now that we were told, the Mueller investigation, that'll be it. That'll be the end all be all. That's it. What Mueller's going to have the goods. Look at, like, you go in above top secret. All the left-wing people. Yeah, that's it. Mueller's going to come out. That'll be it. Collusion. Trump's a Russian spy. All these people. He worked with Russia. He stole the election. He's corrupt. He's terrible. And now you could already see it. Now that it looks like that's not going to be what Mueller says, you already see people like Schiff and them saying, well, that was just one investigation. Now we need to have a second investigation. 81 subpoenas to everyone ever connected to Trump. That's where we need to go from here. It's just all a big witch hunt. You can see the double standards in the garbage. The last thing I'll talk about real quick is, again, this testimony hasn't been released, but Sarah Carter said she has read it. Loretta Lynch gave closed-door testimony, and she testified that there was no defensive briefing given to Trump, despite thinking that people in his campaign were connected to Russians or were being infiltrated by Russian spies. Now, let's be clear. What was given is what's called a general briefing, and this is common for candidates of president, where intel agencies will bring both the major candidates in and say, hey, just an FYI, foreign powers will try to influence your administration, your campaign. Okay, fine. But a defensive briefing is when they say, we have evidence that they are currently trying to infiltrate with this specific person. You need to be careful. That's what you would usually get if they find this type of evidence. So, let's juxtapose the handling of Donald Trump and the idea that people connected to him might have been being attempted to be infiltrated by Russians versus Dianne Feinstein, who employed a Chinese spy for 11 years. In Trump's case, what they did was they'd say, okay, here's Carter Page, for example. 1 second, let me take this. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yeah?
Hey, so I called Grandma and I told her we'd be out there probably around 2-ish.
Okay.
Alright, I'm on my way home now.
Okay, I'm doing a live stream, so I'll talk to you soon.
Oh, okay, bye.
Bye. So think about this. You think, for example, they thought Carter Page... Now, of course, they're full of it. That's the real truth. Because if Carter Page was a spy, why hasn't he been charged? Why hasn't anyone been charged? They had this crucial evidence. Oh, we have damning evidence that people connected to Trump's campaign are colluding with Russians. They're Russian spies. Yet no one's been charged. But supposedly, let's take them at face value. They thought, oh, okay, Carter Page is a Russian spy. One, even before that, they knew the FBI had worked with Carter Page 2 years prior, and he helped them get convictions of Russian agents. So once he was on Trump's team, don't you think they would have went to Trump and said, hey, just so you know, this guy worked with us in the past to try to get Russian agents. But second, once they thought he himself was a Russian agent, what if they're really concerned with stopping potential interference into the United States elections? Wouldn't they at that point go and be like, whoa, hey, Trump, this guy that you just brought into your campaign, he might be a Russian spy. There's only two reasons not to do that. One, it's because you think Trump himself's a Russian spy. But even Comey in May of 2017 and in Lisa Page's testimony in May of 2017, a year after the investigation started, said that they had no evidence whatsoever that Trump was a target or that he colluded in any way whatsoever. So it's clear the FBI, that's not the case. So the only other reason not to go to Trump and say that is because you don't really care about foreign influence. You care more about taking down Trump. And so they were hoping that they could somehow, if they truly believed Carter Page was a Russian spy, they were willing to take the chance of having a president that was being infiltrated by Russians, if that meant possibly taking that president down. In other words, it was more important to attack Trump than it was to stop foreign influence. That's the same people, the same agency that was telling you this was an act of war, the biggest attack on our elections. It's such a huge deal. You hear Peter Strzok in his testimony that's been released saying the reason that the Russia investigation was a bigger deal was he couldn't think of anything more serious. Well, if that's the case, why wouldn't you go to Trump and tell him, look, your campaign's being infiltrated? Instead of doing that, what they did instead was they sent spies, they sent wiretaps, they unmasked names, Obama laxed the law of rules so that as many people as possible in his agencies were able to see all of the accusations of Trump being a spy. The media got leaked a bunch of that information. Obama was then telling foreign allies, hey, by the way, Trump and people connected to him, be careful dealing with them because they might be infiltrated by Russians. That's what they did instead. Now, does that sound like a group that was more concerned about stopping foreign influence than smearing Donald Trump? Of course not. But just in case, let's look and see how they handled it with Dianne Feinstein. Now, Trump, one of the reasons they say that he was suspected was because he was going to be friendly to Russia. Trump's been harsher on Russia than any president before him since Reagan. Sanctions. He's done all kinds of stuff. He's opened up like our exports of energy industry, which has hurt Russia more than anything. He's kicked diplomats out of the country. He's monkeyed with things in Syria that Russia didn't like. All kinds of crap. More than Obama did for sure. Now, let's see Dianne Feinstein. Over the 10-year period that she employed a Chinese spy, she had all sorts of policies that were favorable towards China. Policies that ended up helping them economically or as a trade partner. So if Trump's actions toward Russia raises suspicion, surely Feinstein's actions to Trump or to China for 10 years in office would have raised suspicion to the FBI, but it didn't. See, when they found out that Feinstein had a spy in her employ for 10 years, they arrested the spy, and they went to Feinstein and said, hey, there was a spy connected to you. You should be careful. They didn't put wiretaps on people close to Feinstein. They didn't send spies to deal with her. They didn't leak to the media that Feinstein might be a spy. They didn't unmask people in conversations that were had from wiretaps. None of that. They did what you would expect them to do. They went to the diplomat, or they went to our politician and said, be careful, foreign influencers might be trying to influence you. They might have spies around you, which is what you would expect our intel agencies to do. Now, why the double standard? It's absolutely ridiculous. And it just goes to show, at every level of this, every single level, it's been a constant double standard. Lying to Congress is a crime? Okay. Then Comey should be prosecuted. Brennan should be prosecuted. Clapper should be prosecuted. McCabe should be prosecuted. Where is it? Failing to register as a foreign lobbyist is... Okay, well then... Podesta should be prosecuted. All the people that worked with him. And the people that from Mercury LLC, that was a Republican lobbyist group that just wasn't connected to Trump. They should be prosecuted. It's the same crap. Tax evasion, they're getting Manafort for tax evasion. What about Al Sharpton? He had tax evasion. Don't remember him sitting in prison. You're going to raid Trump's lawyer's office in the middle of the night based on this stuff? Okay. Are we going to... Based on what? The opposition research? So if Trump gets... Are we going to raid Hillary's office in the middle of the night? Other people that lied? Nope. They don't get raided like that. Just more garbage. So, I don't know. It's just, all three of these stories come out in the same week. Of course, it's been overshadowed by the Christchurch shooting. That's not to say that shooting wasn't important and shouldn't have been covered. But, you know, one of the things you see people on ATS say a lot is, when you see a big story like that and a big narrative, pay attention to what's going on elsewhere. And they're right about that because, you know, all of a sudden the narrative shifted for this really bad week for the FBI. And by the way, this is just the tip of the iceberg. More and more information is going to come out. And yeah, Bird of the Abyss, you're right. It's not just that Trump taunted the media. That's definitely part of it. Chuck Schumer told us right at the beginning what this is all about. He went with, I think it was on Stephanopoulos' show, national television, and said, Trump shouldn't criticize the intel communities because they have 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you. That statement should frighten everyone regardless if you're a Trump supporter or not. What that says is unelected bureaucrats that you will never have a voice in who they are have more power than the president that you vote for. And that president has to kowtow to their line or that he will be attacked. And that's exactly what's happened. Schumer knew it. He told us right national television. But so many people don't care because they don't like Donald Trump. The media is just the mouthpiece for the intel agencies. Now keep in mind, the media told us in 2004, 2005, we were lied to about the Iraq War. The intel agencies lied to us. Never again. We should have did more. We apologized. We didn't do enough. Now fast forward to less than 10 years later, I guess about 10 years later, and they're telling us to question the intel agencies is un-American. You're hurting America by even claiming that they could do something wrong. This is after we publicly see text messages from FBI agents saying they want an insurance policy against Trump. To even question that and to say that's inappropriate, you're hurting the country. That's the media. That's the media that's supposed to hold truth to power. They're just a mouthpiece for the establishment Democratic Party and the intel agencies that work for them. That's what it is. And by the way, there are people in the establishment Republican Party that are involved in that group as well. Why do you think John McCain gave over opposition research to the FBI as another connection? Because that's what the Steele dossier was, opposition research paid for by Hillary Clinton's team. Never forget, the reason we needed this investigation was for shady connections between Trump and Russians. But Trump's team tried to get dirt on Hillary from Russians. But Hillary's team actually did get dirt on Trump from Russians, and that's okay. No investigation necessary. The very same Russians that we hear, Deripaska, all these other Russians that people Manafort and people connected to Trump had connections to, had connections to Hillary's team just as well. But it's only a problem when it's one side. Someone that was perceived as anti-establishment won, and the establishment can't take that. That's why you see Jeb Bush saying, we need to primary Trump. That's what needs to go on. That's why the only time you see the media on both sides praise Trump is when he's bombing Syria or doing other things that the intel community wants and the establishment Democrat wants. Yeah, you can smell them in Walmart, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's just... So, just reading this here. Anything else? Yeah, real quick. My wife will be on soon, so I gotta run out. But don't forget, and lastly, I'll say this. I talk about this a lot, and people don't it's hard for people to follow because it's like there's so many details and so many names. But just know there's a double standard. That's all I ask. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. We should all just want consistency. That's it. So if we could say definitively this person lied to Congress and therefore they should be charged, like Michael Cohen, okay, that's fine. But then we've set the standard that other people that lied to Congress should be charged. So if I could show you in black and white that we have proof, for example, James Clapper in front of Congress asked, is the NSA purposely collecting data and listening into people's calls? And he says, no, not intentionally. That was a lie to Congress about a real issue, something really important, the violation of our Fourth Amendment, our right to privacy. Yet he's not charged for it. That's all I'm saying. That double standard is something that should upset us all. And if you have to understand, and I think that that's one of the things I'm trying to do is make it less complex. I know I'm ranting and raving and I'm throwing out a bunch of names and stuff, but I am truly trying to make it less complex and point out these double standards, right? The reason that this is important, I ran for Congress here in rural Pennsylvania, and I don't think a lot of people understood how important this issue is because we talk a lot about rural Pennsylvanians, why we're kind of left out in the cold, both in the state level, because all of Pennsylvania's politics is at the coast, quote unquote, the coast, at the edges. So Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Erie. Those three urban areas have more votes than everything in the center of the state. And so often we don't have a voice at the state level. That's certainly true at the national level. Rural Pennsylvania, we don't have a really strong voice there. And so we talk about all kinds of things that are unique problems to rural areas, particularly rural Pennsylvania. But none of that will matter if the most basic thing you need is, well, the people you vote for that you think represent your positions actually have the ability to do what they're constitutionally, the powers they're constitutionally given. If unelected bureaucrats can influence elections based on people that they don't like to keep them out of office, or even when in office like Trump, have these never-ending investigations that seek to bring them down, then you don't have a voice. Even less than the voice you thought you already had. So until we end this corruption, nothing else matters. And it will be used on the left. You see Tulsi Gabbard getting it now. She's anti-war. See you later. So all my friends on the left that think, well, screw Trump, he had it coming. Okay, it's going to come to bite you. Anytime you cheer for an abuse of power like this, it'll eventually be turned on against you or against people that you support. And so we need to be able to stop this. And I say this over and over again, and I think people just think it's some talking point. This is the absolute truth. Having the strongest intel and investigative agency in the history of the world be used as a political weapon by a sitting president is more of a danger to our country than anything Russia or China or Israel or the UK or France or Japan or Iran or the Ukraine or Turkey combined could do to our country. Period. And especially when they are working in cahoots with the mainstream media, with academia, with the entertainment industry, and with Silicon Valley. Your voice doesn't matter as long as this corruption's allowed to occur. That is why it's important to take it out. That's why I say it's bigger than Trump. If Trump committed a crime, I don't care. Jail him for it. We need to hold these people. And that's why you won't hear me screaming, I'm not a big lock her up person. The villain in this, Hillary sucks, don't get me wrong. And if she committed crimes, she should be held accountable. But the real villain's Obama and the intel agencies. Because he's the one under his watch, and he knew what was going on. He knew what his agencies were doing. He weaponized them to go after a political opponent. That's the real corruption. The people at the head of these intel agencies and their boss. That's who we should be going after. So you won't see me on the whole bashing Hillary, whatever. She's done. Yeah, she's still slightly culturally relevant when she opens her mouth and says something dumb. But until we start to stop this corruption, that's it. Nothing else matters. Jeb Bush is talking about primarying Trump in 2020. I mean, it's absolute insanity. So, but yeah, that's about all I have to say on that. Yeah, real quick, Jesse, you asked about reparations. Yeah, at least, what's his name? Castro that's running, is for reparations. Bernie got crap for not being enough for reparations. I think Kamala Harris has came out in favor of reparations. The Green New Deal that they all supported talks specifically about reparations. It doesn't use that word, but it talks about economically benefiting minority groups for injustices of the past. That's reparations. So yeah, that's something that would have been unheard, just like it would have been unheard of. We were told, reparations, that don't ever come up. Just like we were told, it's not real socialism. It's not real socialism. Well, the people that are basically running the Democratic Party now, such as Ocasio-Cortez, she just came out and said capitalism's irredeemable. Certainly doesn't sound like, no, trust us, it won't be socialism. It is socialism. We know what it is. By the way, check out, I didn't get a chance to get to it today, check out Finland's healthcare system collapsing, because it turns out when you bring in people from different disparate populations that aren't as employed as much, that it's hard to have that strain on your working class people. Maybe a reason that Medicare for all would be a bad thing. So, any other specific questions? The wife will be home soon and I'll have to head out. But yeah, and I specifically, even though I disagreed with you, Bird of the Abyss, thanks for sticking around and disagreeing with me. That's what we should be doing. So, okay, I'm gonna be heading out now. The wife's home. Thank you all for watching.